Good afternoon and a hearty welcome to the officials of the Environmental Management Authority, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Ministry of Public Utilities, the Tobago House of Assembly, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and the Solid Waste Management Committee Limited. My name is Bridget Anizet George, and I am the chairman of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, PAAC, has the mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies, to ensure that expenditures embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of the government agencies as it occurs, and to keep Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for the improvement of public administration. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct an examination into the implementation of sustainable waste methodologies in alignment with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs 6, 11, 12, and 14. The role of the committee is to assist the stakeholders in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval, to determine the challenges being faced and possible solutions to these challenges, and to make recommendations for improvement of public administration. This meeting is being held in public and being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email to parl101@ttparliament.org, to Facebook, to TT Parliament, and X @TT Parliament. At this stage, I'd like to invite members of this committee to introduce themselves, starting from my furthest right.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Lawrence Hislop, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman. Welcome again.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Good afternoon and hearty New Year. Hasselbachers, member.
Thank you. And I'll now ask the representatives of the various agencies to introduce themselves. And because we have such a full house, I'll just call out the order, and not necessarily the order in which you're seated, but the order of the agencies, and hopefully you'll be able to sort out introducing yourselves in a manner that is not confusing to yourselves or us. Okay, so we could start with the EMA.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Hayden Romano, Managing Director of the Environmental Management Authority.
Hi, good afternoon. Wayne Rajkumar, Senior Manager, Environmental Analysis and Coordination, EMA.
Hello, good afternoon. Giselle Joseph, Manager, Environmental Monitoring and Compliance with the EMA.
Hello, good afternoon. Vijaya Ramkalawan, Manager, Permitting, Environmental Management Authority.
Hello, good afternoon. Ms. Annalisa Allen Benjamin, Program Manager, EMA.
Okay, and then maybe we could have the Ministry of Health.
Good afternoon. Dr. Priya Lalu, Principal Medical Officer for Community Services.
Hi, good afternoon. Esther Lachman, Chief Public Health Inspector, Acting, Ministry of Health.
Okay, the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good afternoon. Arati Bidesi Miraj, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kima Gardner, Waste Management Specialist, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jewel Batchesing, Director of the Basel Convention Regional Center for the Caribbean.
Thank you. The Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members, and colleagues. Nicolette Duke, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good afternoon all. Arlene Collins, Ministry of Public Utilities, Director Economic Research, Policy and Planning.
Good afternoon everyone. Aisha Nelson, Solid Waste Sector Lead, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good afternoon. Ayano Lonade, Ministry of Public Utilities, Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dixie Ann Davis-Joseph, Senior Project Manager at the Sectoral Programs and Projects Unit.
Okay, and then maybe we could next have the Tobago House of Assembly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Denise Toby-Koshi, the Chief Administrator of the Tobago House of Assembly. I have a 4-member team. The others will introduce themselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Alicia Bailey-Job, Administrator in the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Linford Beckles, Senior Director at the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Energy in the Office of the Chief Secretary.
Good afternoon. Jasiah Ibrahim, Project Engineer at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ricardo Bob, Public Health Inspector 4, Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection.
Okay. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. Peter Mitchell, Permanent Secretary, Acting. It's just me alone.
Thank you. And the Solid Waste Management Company Limited.
Good afternoon to the Chair, other members of the committee. My name is Sean D'Souza. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of SwimCall, and we have 4 other members of the team who will be joining us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Abigail Whitehall. I'm the Head of Programs and Technical Services Department.
Pleasant afternoon and all the best for 2025. David Manswell, General Manager, Communication, Sales and Marketing, SwimCall.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. Maria Along, the General Manager for Health, Safety and Environment at SwimCall.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Richard Hector, the Acting Head of the Policy Planning and Strategy Services Unit, SwimCall.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think I've got everyone. I don't think we've left out anybody. All right, so at this stage, I'd like to invite the Managing Director of EMA to make a brief opening statement, if he so wishes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. The EMA is very pleased to be present at this examination into the implementation of sustainable waste methodologies in alignments with targets 6, 11, 12, and 14 of the SDGs. This, we feel, is a very important initiative of the PAAC, and really we look forward to participating and assisting the PAAC in its examination. Thank you.
If we could now move on to the Ministry of Health, and I invite Dr. Priya Lalu, the Principal Medical Officer, Acting, to make a brief opening statement.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee and ministries and agencies. I take this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment of the Ministry of Health in supporting the state's capacity in the provision of effective management of biomedical waste, inclusive of its collection, storage, and disposal. Further, our ministry continues to strengthen its systems and ensure that healthcare professionals have the adequate knowledge, skill sets, and processes in the management of waste. It is envisioned that today's proceedings will be insightful towards strengthening our support services with our sister ministries and state agencies in regards to waste management at our public healthcare facilities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now may I invite the Director of Economic Research, Policy and Planning of the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Chair, if you
Chair,
allow
yeah,
me.
well, the Permanent Secretary is here, so I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, missed you. That's why sometimes you mustn't stick to your paper.
A very good afternoon again to you, Chair, members of the committee, and the representatives from the various ministries and authorities, as well as the general viewing and listening public. We at the ministry are grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion, and we look forward to the recommendations that are likely to arise from the stakeholders gathered as we collaborate to ensure increased efficiencies in the management of waste in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now invite the Chief Administrator, acting of the THE.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. And let me take the opportunity to wish you Happy New Year to you and your loved ones on behalf of the Tobago House of Assembly. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on this occasion to provide information and any clarification on the Tobago House of Assembly's activities regarding sustainable waste management methodologies in alignment with the SDGs. Madam Chairman, the THA recognizes the linkage between environmental sustainability and economic prosperity, health and well-being, and disaster risk reduction, among others, especially given the size and vulnerability of the Tobago ecosystem. As we are all aware, addressing issues of waste management in the local, national, and global context is not without its challenges. To articulate these challenges is a cross-sectional team from the Tobago House of Assembly, from Division of Health, Wellness, and Social Protection, as well as the Office of the Chief Secretary, Department of Environment, Climate Change, and Energy, which is a newly established department under the Office of the Chief Secretary. The THA is steadfast and committed to addressing the critical challenges associated with waste management. And as we deliberate today, we trust that we will bring clarity to the activities planned and undertaken by the Tobago House of Assembly, and will also allow us to garner support at the national level towards making Tobago environmentally sustainable in keeping with the global objective and our vision of making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we can have the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government functions as the primary coordinating agency with oversight remit for the 14 municipal corporations and the Trinidad and Tobago Municipal Police Service, responsible for guiding the municipal corporations and the TTMPS towards successful implementation of government policy and development objectives. In this role, we also ensure that a cohesive and comprehensive approach is adopted, which takes into consideration the wider policy perspectives with a great emphasis on adopting a whole-of-government approach. Assistance is given to communities by pooling resources in targeted areas, which include, among others, infrastructure development, disaster management, public safety and security, and public health and sanitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And might I invite the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Good afternoon, everybody. I thank you for the invitation to the Ministry of Planning and Development to address the critical topic of waste management in Trinidad and Tobago and to outline the Ministry's role in advancing sustainable solutions for this pressing issue. Waste management in Trinidad and Tobago is administered by a number of ministries and state agencies, as well as the THA. The Ministry of Planning is a key driver of the country's sustainable development agenda and plays a pivotal role in formulating policies and strategies that align with national goals and international commitments, such as the SDGs. Specifically, the Ministry works to develop and implement national policies which guide the improvement of waste management systems, emphasizing waste reduction, recycling, and environmentally sound disposal. The Ministry is also committed to fostering a culture of environmental responsibility among citizens through public awareness campaigns and capacity building programs aimed at encouraging behavioral change. The issue of waste management has been included in the overarching development policy for Trinidad and Tobago Vision 2030. The government has placed special emphasis on ensuring the sustainable management of the environment. The theme 5, which places environment at the center of our country's social and economic development, sets out strategic initiatives and actions as it relates to waste, which are also enshrined within all sectoral and subsectoral policies. It also should be noted that Trinidad and Tobago's commitment to waste management is well established on an international scale. As a party to the Basel Convention on Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Waste and their Disposal, the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, or POPs, and the Rotterdam Convention on Prior Informed Consent Procedure, the country has been actively engaged in negotiations, intersessional working groups, and the implementation of projects to ensure the objectives of these treaties are realized at a national scale to the benefit of the citizenry and the environment. This includes work under the Basel Convention on waste streams that are of national priority, and many of which have left indelible marks on our society, such as e-waste, including mobile phones and end-of-life vehicles. Furthermore, the sixth session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, Trinidad and Tobago actively participated in negotiations on several resolutions, including resolutions on the sound management of chemicals and waste and highly hazardous pesticides. Collectively, all of these undertakings will translate into strengthening the national waste framework and the development of a comprehensive waste and pollution management system. Trinidad and Tobago is also the host of the Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer for the Caribbean region, which is reputed globally to be a center of excellence, and has also been endorsed as a Stockholm Convention Regional Center. The BCRC Caribbean continues to adeptly augment the capacities of member states in the Caribbean towards the environmentally sound management of waste, including hazardous waste. Madam Chairperson, the Ministry recognizes the challenge of waste management, that the challenge of waste management requires a collaborative approach involving government agencies, the private sector, civil society, and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not only a matter of managing waste, but also a broader commitment to environmental resilience, economic diversification, and social well-being. We look forward to the discussions today and to the committee's insights on how we can enhance our role to contribute to a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Not least, the Chief Executive Officer of SWIMCOL.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and to the committee. SWIMCOL is committed to finding alternative and sustainable ways in managing solid waste in Trinidad and Tobago. We are committed to doing that with best practice. We're also going to realize that while we discuss solid waste, we also discuss the health of the country, the citizenry, and the environment, which will always stay focused. We do look forward to participating and solving or being able to offer any updates necessary to the committee, and also partnering with any of our other agencies to achieve our objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think for the, certainly to put the conversation in context and for the benefit of the listening audience, I'd like to start off the conversation with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Planning and Development. We talk about sustainable development goals. We talk about the various conventions like the Basel Convention and the Stockholm Convention, and then we talk about Vision 2030 and incorporating the separate theme of the environment. And really, I think if you could maybe just explain for the benefit of the national public in terms of the relationship of the Sustainable Development Goals 6, 11, 12, and 14 to sustainable environment and particularly sustainable waste management.
All right, so the relationship between, so SDG 6.
Six is sanitation and clean.
Right.
You there with us? Okay. 6 is clean water and sanitation. 11 is sustainable cities and communities. 12 is responsible and consumption and production, but I guess as we're talking waste is more consumption.
Yeah.
And 14 would be the one with, life underwater.
So sustainable, so SDG 6 is covered under the Vision 2030 Goal 6. So this falls under Theme 5, placing the environment at the center of economic and social development. There's a goal under the Theme 5 of Vision 2030, comprehensive waste and pollution management systems will be created. So this is one goal under that theme. There are strategic initiatives and actions that fall under that goal, which is improving solid waste disposal, creating a mechanism for effective implementation of the international commitments for chemicals and waste, improving management systems for pollution. The SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. This directly relates to sustainable waste management. It is a critical aspect of making urban areas safe, resilient, and sustainable. Effective waste management systems contribute to cleaner cities, reduce health risks, and minimize the environmental footprint of urbanization. The targets under that goal, 11.3, promoting inclusive and sustainable urbanization by integrating sustainable waste solutions into urban planning. Target 11.6, reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities, including waste management and air quality improvement. Target 11.7, provide access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green spaces which are often threatened by poor waste practices. So what would be relevant here would be the activities relating to waste treatment plants, which happen across ministries. There's waste treatment plants administered by public administration, wastewater systems at magistrates' court, wastewater lines at primary schools. So these all contribute to those targets. So this is just an overall, because the ministry, focuses on the hazardous waste, but it's just a little touch of what is happening overall. SDG 12, I'll just read out the targets that are relevant. Target 12.3, half global food waste at the retail and consumer levels, which are vital for reducing organic waste. Target 12.4, achieving environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle. And target 12.5, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. So there are activities under the Ministry of Agriculture, such as the Farm to Table project, the coconut rehabilitation and replanting program that work towards that as those SDG targets. SDG 14, Life Below Water, Target 14.1, calls for the prevention and reduction of marine pollution of all kinds, particularly from land-based activities, including marine debris and nutrition pollution. Target 14.2, sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems. Target 14.5, conserve at least 10% of coastal and marine areas by 2013. So some of the activities across the public service that may contribute to those targets would be the multi-phase wastewater rehabilitation program, which is done at the San Fernando Wastewater Treatment Plant. All of the wastewater projects in Trinidad and Tobago across housing, education, local government, and public utilities. Another one to note is the Beetham Wastewater Treatment Plant. The international coastal cleanups as well combats plastic waste within Trinidad and Tobago's waterways, and EMA's recyclable solid waste collection project, such as ICARE, which EMA can speak to as well. So those are some of the projects, including Guanapo and Forest Park, the construction of recycled facilities there, that will contribute to some of those targets.
Thank you very much. And might I ask you, Pierce, you spoke about things like the Basel Convention and so on. Just for again, first in context, you would have said that we are the national that you are the national focal point. What does that mean for the man in the street, and what benefits at all to the waste management, sustainable waste management systems, and whatever waste issues we have in Trinidad? What any benefits that would redound to us from us being, for your ministry being the focal point of these various conventions?
Well, Chair, through you, can I pass the question to Ms. Patterson? She's well placed to answer.
Good afternoon, Chair, and thank you very much for the question, and thanks, Pierce. I'll start by explaining the Basel Convention Regional Center. So the Basel Convention is a multilateral environmental agreement, like the Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention, to which the government of Trinidad and Tobago is party to. The Basel Convention and the Stockholm Convention, in the article of these conventions, they actually speak to the establishment of regional centers. The regional center is hosted for the Caribbean geographical region by Trinidad and Tobago. And the center is based in St. Clair, and we are serving 15 countries in the Caribbean basin. The work that we've done, so the center receives a subvention from the government, and that subvention literally is to run the center and to have certain staff paid. But under the Basel Convention and the Rotterdam Convention and the Stockholm Convention, the way that the center contributes to these sustainable development goals is through project development. And our project portfolio has significantly grown. And just to name a few and link them to the sustainable development goals that we've done, is that, for an example, under Goal 11, making cities and human settlements inclusive, we, under 11.4, to strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage, we have been able to secure, and I can say with conviction now, because it has been approved, the elimination of hazardous chemicals from supply chains in the carnival industry in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a very new project, and we are actually going to look at the impact of the carnival industry in Trinidad and Tobago and its impact on waste management, because most of what is generated goes to the landfill. Some of it is actually unaccounted for. Under Goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, the center was able to develop a regional project. It has a very long acronym, Madam Chair, but I'll say it for the members of the public. It's called GEF Islands, GEF being the Global Environment Facility, which is a funding mechanism, and it's implementing sustainable low and non-chemical development in small island developing states. And the project, It constitutes 12 countries in the Caribbean region, and the value of the project is $20 million US. But to bring it back to Goal 12, we are doing certain activities under this project which are very relevant to SDG 12 and 12.4 and 12.5 with specificity, including the identification of stockpiles of obsolete pesticides, including things like, well, there's no DDT in Trinidad and Tobago, but looking at PCB oils and other e-waste chemicals. Also, we are going to now take those chemicals and permanently export them for disposal because they cannot be disposed of in the Caribbean region. There's also hazardous waste management strategies are being developed. We are looking at empty pesticide container management. We are starting to break the barriers on understanding the e-waste flows in what is happening with e-waste in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as end-of-life vehicles and plastic waste management specific to PVC, as well as we have another project that we were able to do in collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank under Jeff Islands, which is valued at just about $3 million US, and we will be looking at an assessment for the treatment of liquid waste at the Beetham landfill. Under Goal 12 and continuing with some of the work that we're doing under this project, we are looking at sustainable procurement and trying to improve the procurement practices for green government policies as well, and looking at sustainable financing strategies. Lastly, under Goal 14, to conserve the sustainable use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Under the Jeff Islands project, we developed a plastic tie turners challenge, and under this, we developed an app. This was geared for youth, ages 15 to 35. Yeah, yes, there's a definition for youth, and we're able to raise awareness on plastic, and this was actually very well done in Trinidad and Tobago through a company called Restore Sense of ICANN, where work was facilitated through that NGO to reach the youth, and the numbers were 11,000 participants took part in this activity. The other one that we are doing currently in collaboration with the Environmental Policy and Planning Division is that we are actually going to have a meeting on Friday. It's a long name, but essentially looking at plastic pollution and inventory of plastic waste, as well as a roadmap for what needs to be done to ensure that plastics are dealt with in an environmentally sound manner in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask one question, because what piqued my attention is when you spoke about end-of-life vehicles, and I'm sure the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, right, would have a vested interest in that. So you say, a project being developed. You are just developing a project. What happens after that? Does your development actually take implementation, or would that project be passed on to another entity?
Okay. Thanks for the question, Madam Chair. I should have explained. The Basel Convention Regional Center acts as the executing agency for these projects. The center has the fiduciary requirements to allow for the monies to come in. We are not part of the we are autonomous then, so we are able to manage the funds. So what the center does through its execution is that we will develop the terms of references, issue the terms of references, recruit the consultant, enter into the contracts, and actually facilitate the work across the board. So let me just state that the ELVs, the end-of-life vehicles consultancy, is almost to its end. It ends in April. And again, just for information, what it sought to do was specific to Trinidad and Tobago, but all the countries that participated, 11 countries participated, we were able to assess the status quo of what is happening with end-of-life vehicles. And what the vision was that we would develop essentially our best available techniques and best environmental practices going forward for these companies that are involved in it. There's a nuance, as you indicated, Madam Chair, with end-of-life vehicles and ministries such as rural development, because the biggest part that is attractive is the metals, but there are other parts of the vehicle that are equally an issue, and that includes the used lead-acid batteries, the tires, the upholstery, the waste oils. So this project really tries to enlighten, because sometimes when the vehicle is taken apart, those components aren't considered. They only go after the metals, but the others are left out in the open and leaching happens, etc. So through this project, we're hoping to raise the awareness of those who are getting into this type of entrepreneurship and ensuring that it's done in an environmentally sound manner. It's very, very incipient, or I would even say nascent, yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Batchasing?
I was explaining, it's quite simple, it's batchasing.
The batchasing, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll open up the discussion to the members of the committee. I believe the Vice Chair, Dr. Bodu, has some questions to ask.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will just follow up with the Ministry of Planning and Development with regards to the some of the challenges, and I'll direct it to you, Madam PS, some of the financial limitations that you've experienced in your submission. And of course, you mentioned that part of the measures would be to solicit grant funds, and we had some discussion on the grant funding. So I just want to ask whether you can give us an idea of how successful the development of the project proposals have been to access the applicable funding. Just an overview.
I'll direct the question back to
Sure.
Ms. Batchasing. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, PS, and thanks, Mr. Vice Chairman. So the Basel Center has been relatively successful in securing grant funding. It was a unique situation where the Global Environment Facility recognized the importance of waste and chemicals management, and a specific pool of funding was developed at their level for small island developing states. And we were able to capitalize on that through the auspices of the center. So the total value of funding that we've received is at least 22 million US. Well, we haven't received all of it, of course, but that is the total sum. In addition to that, we also try to develop other smaller projects, as we've done through the auspices of the United Nations Environment Program, the Inter-American Development Bank, and other agencies as well. So it has been quite successful. Waste and chemicals management is gaining traction now, and it has been fortuitous for us.
So the issue of the disposal of biohazard waste is also quite important, and I note in your submission the purchase, installation, and commissioning of an autoclave unit at the SWRHA. And if I could perhaps direct a few questions again to you, Madam PS, in terms of some further details with regards to this autoclave unit. If I may ask specifically, when was the unit, which is at the SWRHA, purchased, installed, and commissioned? And perhaps at the same time, you can give us the estimated costs associated with this purchase and installation.
So I'll direct the question to Ms. Gardner, Waste Management Specialist.
Thank you, PS, and thank you very much for the question. So the autoclave unit was actually part of a pilot project that was part of a regional project that the country took part in. The idea was to replace precarious incineration activities with this autoclave unit. So it would have been commissioned and installed around 2022 at the San Fernando General Hospital to treat, of course, with the biomedical waste there. The exact quantity I will have to pass to the BCRC Caribbean to give you that figure if she knows offhand. I can't recall. But yeah, so essentially it was installed to replace the precarious incineration activities there with this biomedical waste treatment facility. We actually had an official handover ceremony to commemorate Zero Waste Day, just to encapsulate, all of the activities, etc., that would have been part of that unit being put in there. As I mentioned before, for treatment of infectious waste, some pathogens and some sharps, so needles, etc. And the idea is that through the technology, it's a sterilization technology using steam to sterilize the biomedical waste, rendering it safe essentially after that point in time. It works on an 8-hour shift. I think it's a quantity of 1.8 tons daily in terms of the amount of weight it's actually able to treat, the actual autoclave system itself. Based on the feedback we've had, because we have a really good relationship with the San Fernando General Hospital, we've had really good feedback in terms of the usage of it, so much so that they indicated their interest in perhaps, expanding the use to other within the facility itself to accommodate, of course, the treatment for the Regional Health Authority.
So you're confirming that this autoclave unit is fully functional?
It was operational, certainly, yes.
Yeah, and
Commissioned and operational.
And staff has been trained and so on?
Certainly, yes. So that was part of the project as well. We had an international consultancy come in as part of the commissioning process. The staff were trained during that point in time. And I mentioned before as well, it was part of a regional project. So we have the advantage as well of the benefit of other countries in the region who are part of that project also being able to provide capacity if necessary as well in certain areas where we might have, certain lapses, etc., with the technology.
Yeah. Can you indicate whether this unit will replace the use of the incinerator or incinerators at the SWRHA?
So from my understanding, of course, I can't speak on behalf of the hospital, but from my understanding, the older incinerator, I know certainly was decommissioned and replaced by the autoclave unit. I do believe there were issues in terms of the existing incinerator, but I can't speak, of course, fully on what the position is of the hospital in terms of that unit.
So in terms, you mentioned that the current capability is 1.8. You mentioned that the current capability is 1.8 tons daily on a 1 8-hour shift.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sufficient to meet the current and projected needs for disposal of medical waste?
So I think based on the evaluation done by the hospital, this is why they were considering procuring further autoclave units to try and ensure that the quantity of waste that is actually disposed of by the hospital is suitably accommodated with the necessary units.
Can you indicate, or are you in a position to say what percentage of the waste the autoclave will take care of at this time?
As far as I'm aware, I believe it's all of the waste that's currently being generated at the hospital, but I can't, of course, say beyond that.
All right, thank you. Madam Chair, if you may put it here, perhaps I can link this to the... Thank you. Yeah, so with regards to the submission, and I'm looking at page 2 of the submission, PMO, and the question was asked about the cost of managing the storage and collection of biomedical waste to the Ministry of Health, and this broken down by the RHAs. And there's a table there that says that SWRHA is spending $203,781.46 per month in terms of managing the collection and storage of biomedical waste. Can you indicate if this is waste in addition to what is disposed of by the incinerator? Are you in a position to tell us that?
I can't give an oral response to that at this point in time because I'm representing the PS and the Principal Medical Officer of institutions, so I think the PMOI would have more information about that, but I can furnish a response to the committee at a later date.
I thought it might be a difficult question for you to answer, but can you undertake to give us the answer in writing? And additionally, if you can indicate the period of time since this expenditure has been, and whether any measures will be undertaken to limit this expenditure, because the submission goes on to speak to this being contracted at this point in time.
Correct, yes.
Can you give that undertaken?
I will give that information in writing, yes.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Bacchus?
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up on that. So, obviously the unit that you have deals with the sterilization, rendering it safe, and then disposal of it. These costs are associated with collection, storage, and I guess associated with the delivery of it to that unit. Would that be the way it works? And the reason why I'm asking that is that those costs, Vice Chair, just following up on how you've put it, is that these are separate activities. One would involve getting it, bagging it, tagging it, placing it, having it set. And then the other one is what should be disposed of by the autoclave will be dealt with there. So if you could give us that delineation and separation, please, so that we don't associate costs with one thing that is really spread out across a wider cross-section of activities. Yeah? So please, if you can do that. Chair, and through you, thank you. There's a fundamental question that I have, and I'm putting this out to pretty much everyone, that part of what the sustainable thing is supposed to do is to deal with having the environment at the center of development. So you're planning your major projects, the environment has to be a significant consideration in it. And as such, it's not a bolt-on when it's done. Can those things truly align? And are they really congruent? Or as some people think, are they really things that are diametrically opposed? Can you cater for environment, be efficient, be timely, be cost-effective, and do all of that as one thing? Is that readily available? And I ask, please, even from the Ministry of Planning, I'm sure from the convention part of it, etc. Is this something that is diametrically opposed or something that we believe really will work and can continue to work from a development standpoint? Maybe I could start with the Ministry of Planning.
So I will pass the question to the waste management specialist, but just to contextualize, at the Ministry of Planning, in our administration of the PSIP, what we ask for when projects are submitted is an environmental assessment of every project and a plan in terms of how it is executed. So before any project is submitted or funded through the PSIP, there must be a consideration on the environmental impact. Included in the plans and the implementation are supposed to be considerations, environmental impact considerations, whether or not it's a negative impact or a positive impact. If there's mitigation, that is supposed to be part of the project, part and parcel of every PSIP project, and that is passed in Tobago. So I could pass this over.
Thank you very much, PS. And just to complement the PS's intervention, so of course the Ministry of Planning and Development, excuse me, we do have 4 main pillars of focus. So the economic, the environmental, the social, and the spatial aspect. And particularly, of course, in the work of the Environmental Policy and Planning Division, the environment is at the center of everything that we do. So all of the projects that we particularly undertake would have the environment-centric focus. I would respond in a broader theoretical way, just to say simply that I think a lot of the evaluations that are done don't necessarily consider the negative externalities and negative impacts of activities, etc. So that's not factored in terms of cost. And so because of that, it tends to get lost in accounting. And so typically we don't see or we don't have a value, let's say, for the negative impacts on the environment to factor into whether let's say potentially some sort of development or something of this sort may be beneficial or not. So just to directly answer your question then, they're certainly not diametrically opposed. And I do think that if that true cost accounting actually comes into play, then we're going to have a better picture in terms of getting real figures and understanding of the actual benefits that the environment would contribute for particular projects. And so the projects, as I mentioned before, that we undertake are very much environmental focused and look, of course, to ensuring that balance in terms of economic development and, of course, the social aspect as well.
Thank you for that. And so the key component in this that I was going to, and you mentioned it, is cost. So the costs are involved in the management of the environmental impact pieces. And they're also, well, not costs, but beneficial pieces associated with having the environment well protected in what you do. Without the cost numbers, then the evaluation of the project in terms of it being able to go forward and not having to bolt on that cost at the end of it to protect the environment. How is that being addressed now? Because you have the impact, but you don't know the cost. How are we going to manage that so that we don't end up with building this? It costs $10 million to build it, but it costs $50 million to sustain it environmentally. But you only find that out when you're finished building it. How are we working through that?
So I'll answer in terms of our project development aspect and say when the projects themselves are developed, there are considerations given in terms of the potential environmental benefits from actually realizing the project at the end, of course, of its term. So for one example, for instance, Jewel mentioned the Jeff Islands program, which looks at essentially trying to get small island developing states like Trinidad and Tobago onto a safe chemicals development pathway. And so in developing the projects, they will be looking at particular end goals, for example, removal of a certain quantity of persistent organic pollutants. And of course, in doing that, there will be the attendant health and environmental benefits associated with that. So, for instance, even with that Jeff Islands project, the target is to remove 656 metric tons of POPs and 38 metric tons of mercury from the environment, which is equivalent to about 23,000 tons of materials themselves being actually removed from the environment, which, as I mentioned before, would translate into not having to or preventing the potential negative health or environmental impacts that would naturally ensue with it there. Yeah? But I think as well as part of the environmental and the waste management aspect nationally, that's where the EMA comes in terms of the environmental impact assessments. The EIs are also conducted as part of the evaluation process for the projects too.
Chair, again, thank you again for that. And I will tell you that you do have an uphill task, and I'm saying that from the perspective of you're doing something where the impact of it is something not happening. And that is something we as a society seem not to be able to grasp. When you do what you do, and if you do it effectively, then people don't get sick. Then there is no cost of cleanup. Good luck with that. Could I ask then, and thank you for the segue to the EMA. One of the things that perceptions that are in the public domain and in other places, and I'm glad that we have the EMA here to clean it up. You spoke about these environmental impact assessments and where they are. In aligning the projects and the work that has to be done and putting the environment at the center, obviously that is a key component of it. Yet sometimes, Managing Director, it seems that while you do that, like everything just goes on pause. It is almost like the EMA is being blamed for stymieing projects for doing these assessments. How do you want us to understand this properly? And what is the role, what is the proper way in which we should be looking at this?
Thank you so much, Chairman, through you. Thank you so much for the questions, because it's a dilemma that we face as a country, and it's not a new dilemma. I mean, 30 years ago, and yes, the EMA will be 30 years this year, when the EMA was formed, that was the exact thinking that was happening in the Parliament. How do we bring forward the environment and make the environment something that we understand as being critical for human health? Because yes, we've been looking at the economic, yes, we've been looking at the social, at the expense of the environment. Today, 30 years later, I want to tell you that all is not lost. We now have business people who come to us who, after, quarreling with us with respect to, and in this one case was the water pollution rules and having to come get a water pollution permit. And they were so upset about this permit. And now they're telling us, we're actually saving money based on what we're doing because we're using less water. And so things are changing, and things are changing because I think, we live in a connected world. I mean, this whole digital transformation, things are coming to us immediately. And therefore, we're starting to understand that, as a small island, it is even more crucial for us. Waste disposal is critical for us. And, yes, we have a vision 2030, in terms of putting the environment at the center of social and economic development. We have the SDGs. but we also have a national environmental policy. And all of us in the public service, in accordance with Section 31 of the EM Act, are supposed to be doing everything we do in accordance with the national environmental policy. And even that we're seeing a change in terms of government ministries and agencies are now aligning their work. The PSIP, you need, to put in the whole environmental impact of these projects. So that is also happening. So, yes, it is an uphill challenge, but I think it's happening.
Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to follow up on what you just mentioned. You have all these policies and so forth, but what strategies are you using to engage the public, to engage the average man and woman on the street so we buy in and we support the efforts?
So with respect to the national environmental policy, which would have been approved in Parliament in 2018, and there was a little lapse, and then we had 2020 and 2021 in terms of COVID. The first thing that we wanted to do is to sensitize the government ministries and agencies. We do have a National Council for Sustainable Development who's supposed to drive, where are we going with respect to our NEP? And not by doing the work, but finding out from all these government ministries, agencies, the THA, how is your work aligned to the NEP? Do you understand the NEP? There are 6 priority areas, 24 thematic areas, some 252 policy statements. How is your work fitting in with that? And that's where we are at this point in time, educating the government ministries and agencies, because remember, the EM Act says you are supposed to be doing your work in accordance with the NEP. And in terms of the general public, it's very soft. Every now and then we'll put out an ad or something in terms of the NEP, but really trying to get government ministries and agencies aligned firstly.
How many agencies and ministries have you been able to engage to date?
I would think the majority. We had a number of sessions. In one session in Brian Lara, we had a couple of sessions in our office. We had a session in Tobago. So we have been, most ministries and agencies have now been engaged. The National Council for Sustainable Development have both private sector, public sector, agencies, in terms of membership. It's chaired by the chairman of the EMA. The deputy chairman is a senior officer in the Ministry of Planning and Development. So there has been a lot of an engagement. Again, though, we're asking people to do more. Well, let me be careful. We're asking people to think differently, because we don't want you doing more work. We want you to see how is your work is aligned to the NEP, or how do you align your work to the NEP? And that's a little culture change that we're dealing with.
So I wanted to find out, though, Managing Director, in terms of, I hear you in terms of dealing first with the government agencies, but as was said, there's a role for the man in the street. We in 2025, so don't test my maths, but we have 5 more years to 2030, or 4. Depend. I want to know in terms of who is charged with the responsibility of monitoring and seeing that the engagement that you've had with the ministries are successful in that they stick in it. Who's holding them to that? And secondly, when do we begin with the man on the street? Because I think very often as individuals, we don't see ourselves. We think that that's a role for the government, or that's for the EMA, or whatever. When do we begin with the man on the street?
So not only with respect to the NEP, but with respect to the work of the EMA, we have been examining for the last month or two how 2025 will be different in terms of involving the public. Because, you know, everybody feels that the EMA should be doing everything. And how do we, one, tell the public what is the role of the EMA and what is the role of other ministries, agencies in terms of the environment, one. And two, how do we get people more involved? I mean, when we look at the eye care project, a major culture change, because every time we remove an eye care bin because, you know, the irresponsible people are throwing garbage in the bin rather than recyclable stuff, we get an uproar of complaints. So it means the behavior change has taken place. We feel Trinidadians and Tobagonians, I mean, are not involved in the environment, but we are. You provide the facility, and we will do the right thing. And that's what we have found with respect to the eye care project. And therefore, how do we do more of that is something that we're examining. And hopefully by the end of the first quarter this year, we'll have a plan in terms of how we move forward, especially as it is our 30th anniversary.
Well, you know, Mr. Managing Director, you fall right into my...
I know.
Okay, so eye care. You bring us right there. I think somewhere in the submission I see 700 and something sites. I agree with you that there's a critical mass out there who will do the right thing. Okay? Where are these 700 and something sites located? And I don't expect you to list all, but if you do it per municipality, if maybe you could just highlight 2, 3, so that people out there could know. Because I used to know where it was, but I don't know. Okay? And I would say it has inhibited what I used to customarily do. Okay? So that in terms of that, if you could let us know some of where these sites are. Now, I think also in the submission, we were told that some of these sites were closed. So if you could tell us those that have been impacted and what has been put in place. Yeah.
So I will start, and I mean, I would let the program manager, Annalisa Allen Benjamin, I mean, give you the details, because she's closer to the project than I am. A lot of the sites were in schools because we remember we want our young people to drive the behavior change with the adults. So we have both secondary schools, we have primary schools, I mean the university. We have some high profile sites. Our Whitehall, the Prime Minister's office, the President's house, a number of the supermarkets, and we wouldn't call name, told us we had to remove the bins because people were putting garbage, and they were these social media posts with this major supermarket with all this garbage outside the supermarket, and therefore their response was for us to remove the bin. Annalisa, you could continue with some of the other sites for me, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I can definitely direct everyone to a Google site map that we do have on our Facebook page, which makes all the 94 public sites we have at this time, and we have 568 schools in Trinidad and in Tobago. We have 40 sites. The 40 sites, however, we have provided infrastructure under the TRI, which is under the THA, and it's under their remit. at that time. Right now, for example, some of the 94 sites, we have to understand some of these sites are rent-free agreements, so people come on board to allow us to put the public site bins on their location. So, for example, in Diego Martin, we were at the Diego Martin Regional Corporation. We have a bin there. We have at Peaks, that's private sector working with us. I'm just going to call a few in Port of Spain, Central and South. Then we have at Maraval Road, the NP gas station there. So, for example, we would have had one on, up there in Bossia Village, but the gas station went under renovation. So in that case, the bin had to be removed. So whenever there are renovations, we do have movements. So there's flexibility there. In Tunapuna Regional Corporation at the Eddie Hart, there is a bin there. At True Value, there's a bin there. We have found wherever there are bins where there's a line of sight, we get better behavior. We don't have naughty actors. Some of the actors, you know, they're naughty. Some are well-intentioned, meaning some put an old suitcase, a baby seat, chair, notwithstanding. Some of the signage is a bit faded, yes. We're hoping with our funding we can alleviate some of that. I give some examples there. We're in all the schools. We're at C3 malls. We try to go in malls where it's public and you have a little security on, where people behave a little better when there is a line of sight. We are in Point Fortin. So these 94, they're spread out through North, Central, East, Trinidad, and as I said in Tobago, they have under the TRRI. Yes, we have challenges with naughty behavior, and it really, we look to do a lot more communication that has to be consistent. So yes, there's a social media page, but it really has to be at different levels to drive that engagement, and we work with schools as much as possible and as our funding allows at this time.
Member Bacchus?
Yeah, so, and I would understand that there would have been a consistent ramp up. When you started, you had this amount, and it only grew over time. I know because I deal with it. What may have contributed to, and I don't know how this will work with you, with some of the pictures that you would have seen, is that I think the cadence of collection needed to change. I think what happened is you started with this amount being there and you could collect once every 2 weeks. As people got accustomed to it and started to use it more, and I know the ones I used to use because I used to be in some of those supermarkets you speak about, and they're not there anymore. We now go to the new places that they are, but you find the same thing. They're overflowing, so it's not just that it's full, around it is full, adjacent to it is full, and then it looks like garbage, but it's simply more plastic than the item can hold. Is it that you're going to look at that from the perspective of adjusting the cadences of collection to suit what is happening at the areas, et cetera, et cetera? How are you going to deal with some of that? Is that my observation to it?
Well, I mean, good observation, and we will. I mean, once the quantities increase, we will increase collection. We had a meeting with the PS yesterday, and we've been told that the funding is coming. So it means that you know, we can do more than what we were doing. So we can improve, we can increase based on the fact that the funding is going to be available, because we were very concerned in terms of the funding and our ability to continue, but we've been assured that it will be continued.
Member Hislop?
Thanks, Chair. Just a follow-up. When these plastics, when you collect the plastics, just for the sake of the public, what's the next step? What do you do with them? What have you count in terms of the tonnage, in terms of value for
So we are responsible for collection, and our partner, Swimcall, is responsible in terms of what happens next with the plastics. So we deliver them. We deliver everything from iCare is delivered to Swimcall, and then Swimcall, treats with it as the person responsible for that part of the project.
So we'd like, Madam Chair, Swimcall could come in. I hope they don't end up in the landfills.
So what we currently do, we actually have a processing and a separating and sorting facility at NAMDEVCO. in Port of Spain. So we receive, at this point in time, we're processing approximately 405 tons annually of the same material. Through the engineering or the logistics of the EMA, they represent about 90% of our material that comes in. We will therefore basically either process into pellets, or what we're doing right now at this point in time, we actually are going to bale, and then we look towards exporting where opportunities present itself, where we have an agent that either goes to the US or to Honduras. So that right now at this point in time is where we are actually processing, and that's what's happening with it at this point in time when it comes to the PET and any other material that comes in. Because we also process cardboard. There's glass that goes back to Carib, which is sent back to them for their kiln. And we also have paper that we also see about using and being able to export once there's demand and we're able to get the containers together. We're able to export that at this point in time.
So what prevents SWMCOL from going the other step, going the extra mile, and instead of exporting, doing the actual recycling in Trinidad and Tobago? We are a juggernaut where manufacturing is concerned. So what is required to take us to the other level?
Actually, we're literally on the threshold of that. In July of 2024, as the panel may be aware in the committee, there were 3 policies that were passed and are waiting to basically to be made into legislation. And it's interesting, if we look at any of the other countries internationally who do well, and let's use the Netherlands, for example, when it comes to beverage containers, as we're on this topic. The Netherlands has been doing this for 19 years, and they're perfecting it. Barbados is doing this for 39 years, and is only have a 50% redemption. So where we are right now, we recognize that we are not doing this, and there are opportunities. There is, probably for the first time, we've been talking about beverage containers policies for probably 20, 25 years. It's because of the political will and the support, it is where it is at this point in time, where it's going to become, it's before the CPC and going to the AG's office to be made into legislation. Once that occurs, that therefore puts a structure in place that everything you just discussed could then dovetail into entrepreneurism, into redirecting material and being able to have revenues being generated. At this point in time, there are a number of people who, first and foremost, even if you look at the TTMA and through the local beverage manufacturers, we have had meetings with stakeholders a bit on the cusp of this because everybody's expecting it. It's very much like what everybody said in this room. The recycling and doing the right thing is just waiting for the opportunity. And with the policy and legislation, it meets that crossroad and will be able to facilitate same.
But okay, so you're saying to us that you're waiting on legislation to take it to the other level. That's what you're saying.
So, in fact, I will go further than that in the emphasis law.
But if you currently, you say you're processing how what's the quantity?
We are doing approximately 405 tons, which is really literally a drop in the bucket for what there could be. So if we were to talk and talk statistically what we're talking about, out of the plastic that goes into our landfill, you're looking at about 164,000 metric tons of plastic inside there.
That goes into the landfill.
That will come out based on our statistical data that we did in 2024. When it came, we actually had a professional study done when it came to the classification and everything else for waste. It does tell us this is significant, and therefore there are opportunities for everything that you just said to commence. There's a stock feed.
No, but forgive me if I may not fully understand what you're sharing, but I'm saying if you currently have that stock and that potential, what prevents SWMCOL from taking a decision, a policy decision, that does not necessarily need legislation to say, this is what you have to do with a beverage container? What prevents you from saying, as a company, let's do this. Let's set up what is required to instead of sending the cardboard out and the plastics out, we can do it right here. The same way that the bottles don't go out because Carib has the facility to do that. So I'm asking, what prevents SWMCOL, or I don't know, maybe a partnership with private sector to say, let's set up a full recycling plant here that cardboards and plastics could remain here and we don't have to send them out. And then we could export the actual container when we've manufactured something out of it.
So unfortunately, we need to have policy that gives confidence in private and the public sector. And without policy, investments will be made because now we know it's formalized. Right now it's informal. And every industry, when it comes to waste management, or in this case, beverage containers, that does not have a policy has proven to fail. And that is tested throughout. And that's why I alluded just now to both what is happening in the Netherlands and what is happening right in neighboring Barbados. It was not done because of just entrepreneurism. People are not going to invest unless there are policies that help support and encourage. We spoke about sustainable goals earlier, and we also believe very strongly in Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which speaks to facilitating. This is not what we do at this point in time. There are opportunities, but we need to have both private sector involved and state. In all these other countries we spoke about who are doing quite well, this is a private sector initiative, but we need to take charge because we control where all this material ends up, which is not where we want to be. So once a policy is in place, and I'm going to be very confident that this thing is going to happen because of what it represents. There are a lot of private entrepreneurs and manufacturers who are already saying, I am on board with you, and everything it has discussed about recycling plants, about opportunities, about getting their own bottles back, are literally just saying, I am on board. We have done the stakeholders meetings, but once that policy is the trigger, that is going to basically put us in a place that we need to be, and it's very important that we do that. As I said before, we've been talking about this in Trinidad and Tobago for almost 20, 25 years, ladies and gentlemen. But this is the first time it's getting to this stage because there were gaps. We've been able to get best practice. We've been able to get first world, but people have done it before. Make sure we have the right policies that fit Trinidad and Tobago legislation and culture. That's something that we can't ignore. And as a result, we now have a model that is ready to go to production. Production starts with P, policy starts with P, sir, and that's the only thing that we need to have the policies in place.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to go back to EMA and ICARE. So the funds that you are talking about that look as if you're going to end, that's the 17 million?
Correct.
Yes?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and I wanted to ask, seeing the delay in that has affected your project, how far that 17 million is going to carry you with this? Because it can't be a project again. It has to be a way of life. So this 17 million, how far that is going to carry you? And what happens after that?
Well, I mean, based on what Sean was just saying, our expectation is that the 17 million will take us for maybe 12 to 18 months. And during that time, ICARE would finish and SWIMCAL or the Waste Authority or whatever you call it will kick in, and therefore there will be a new recycling authority in Trinidad and Tobago. That is the expectation that we have. And we're very happy, I mean, and we feel very confident based on what SWIMCAL is saying, based on what public utility is saying, that it is going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Member Bacchus?
Back at you again. So, in preparation for all of these things, I normally go and talk to a lot of people. And in talking to them, they said to me a couple things. One of the major causes of mosquitoes in Trinidad and Tobago is tires. It's a strange thing to say. Tires belong on vehicles. Vehicles don't cause mosquitoes, only to find out that in every bush, river, drain, waterside, rooftop, backyard, is old tires. And it has become more prevalent than it used to be, because normally when you change your tires, you still leave it by the tire shop. Now you have to pay the tire man to take it. So people throwing them back in the trunk and then throwing them on the side of the road. One, what is happening with tires, and if we're doing anything with tire recycling and collection like you're doing with plastics, where is that? and two other similar types of things. I mean, you're dealing with the plastics on one side, but tires is the next big one. I'm sure you would know which are the others that you have to deal with. If you've dealt with bottles more or less. What is happening with tires? What is happening with this? And this goes on to the impact that we were talking about. If you collect the tires, there are less mosquitoes, less dengue, less. This is the consequential thing that we're talking about. Where are we?
So I will start, and then I could pass on to Sean. I mean, in 2015, when we were envisioning this recycling project, included in it was tires and electronic waste. Based on what was happening with the beverage containers, they slipped out, tires and electronics slipped out because we just didn't have the funding to deal with beverage containers, tires, and electronics. Thankfully, Swimcall had started, and he could say more in terms of the shredding of the tires. Kariri has just started a really interesting projects in terms of using the tires in as aggregate for road building material. Basel, did a really good project in terms of cell phones, and they're also looking at the electronic on a smaller scale. So it is happening, but very slowly. There are the cement company has also been interested in the tires in terms of using it as feedstock, and that is something that is also being examined. So a lot of activity, a lot of things are happening, but very low key, and maybe that it is more in the open. Maybe we could try to move a little faster, but I don't know. Sean, if.
So, thank you very much. So let's add to that. We're talking about 1 million tires every year that's coming into circulation. We also have to look at what you do with the tires and what makes sense rather than just chipping it up. Unfortunately, there's a fact that once we put tires into a landfill, whether we chip it, it becomes a fire hazard and a major problem and contaminant to that. So right now, there are two options that have been proposed because we need to chip away at these 1 million tires a year at small bites to digest it. So we have to look at the technology. So recently, through the UTT, they have found a way where they're literally separating the three materials out of the tires and making tire crumb, and now that is being incorporated as a 2% into paving roads. That study should be finalized, and testing should be completed by January or February this year, so we could say, is it acceptable? But it has been practiced in other countries in the world, so it's not just the first time we're doing it here. Two, we need to look at what are we going to do with the material and the infrastructure for the machinery to be able to deal with this, because if you don't deal with it properly, it's just going to become another direction of moving a problem from one place to the next. If we were to put tires in some cases that we had to basically crumb it and put it in landfills, there were opportunities where we were exploring where these tires could have been used for using retaining walls above ground and trying to sustain in low budget areas on how could we reuse it. There are some options, but we need to find one that is really the proverbial silver bullet. And I think the technology and having the machinery and infrastructure, because once you get the tire crumb out, there are people who are exploring using other opportunities for that tire crumb. At this point in time, it's a bit limited. And therefore, we depend on, to start with, what are the proven opportunities? One was for the kiln, when it came to cement manufacturing as a source of fuel. The other one has to do with what UTT is doing, and we just wait for their results. When it comes to using it as a substitute, as aggregate substitute into the road paving opportunities. I know we have thousands of miles of roads that we could very well work on and be able to rehabilitate. So at this point in time, to say that we are ready to say that we could start addressing that, the answer is not at this point in time, because we need to have the investment. We need to have the proven test results to say that this is an opportunity, because we don't want to create a problem, just move it into another threshold, another pigeonhole. We need to address these things, and we are willing to partner. And as I said, when it comes to sustainable goal number 11, we have a responsibility as the gatekeepers for solid waste to find other people to find ways to partner and who may be innovative and have other ideas on how do we solve some of these problems that we're currently facing with tires. That's where we are at this point in time. We are still not where we want to be. It is an issue that we are very worried about. I have approximately 6,000 tires when I look at my transfer station that is just south of the market, and that's a fire hazard. So we're looking at opportunities. There are 2 other people in Trinidad and Tobago who are basically trying to rework the tires as industries, and even they are having issues with capacity. So we need to choose how we are doing it. But as I said, this is not going to be done in just one. We need to get multiple channels, which we alluded to just now. And I know at this point in time, the CMEX or the one of the propositions with respect to using the tires or solid waste as fuel is something that has been presented and is going to be presented to MPU and to be reviewed and considered. So those are sometimes the starting points to address this issue of end-of-life tires at this point in time. Chair.
Heslop?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just is it really an issue of the technology, or is it really an issue of the facilities and maybe the will? Because, and the reason I ask that is because you have the reuse of the crumb in road surface material is a tried and tested. It's all technology outside of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the other materials that you get out of the tire when you shred it, because you could sort it. You'll get fabric, you'll get the copper, you get the metal out of it, and so on. And so the question I'm asking is: it really the technology? Because the technology is there, proven and tested, that if you shred, this is what you're going to get. We've reused the crumb as, instead of bitumen, they've used that to mix with aggregate to the road surface in order to add to it. Or is it just maybe the real will isn't there, or the funding may not be there to push in that direction, really?
So I do believe there's a level of confidence that we gathered with technology at its back. And once again, once those results come out from UTT and their collaboration, because I also understand, I asked the very same question, but they've been doing this elsewhere, but it has to do with other environmental factors. So testing is critical. So I was also saying, could we not have pushed the envelope? But we do want to go and push the envelope and then realize there are certain criteria that we have omitted. And then this becomes a faux pas. So the testing is important. I think there's one other thing that I'll probably really urge the community, the committee, and the population at large is a level of patience. And I know we're really probably going to be asking a lot for that because there's an expectation. But we don't want to go and put systems in place if the science that is there is not properly articulated and formulated. And we end up with another problem on our hands and it comes off.
So quickly on the science. We saw, I think it was last year, this report with UTT doing the same thing, putting down the asphalt, patching a hole, patching a roadway, and that kind of thing. Have you gotten any information from UTT as it relates to, the EMA could speak to that as well, I don't know, as it relates to what was the success of that? Is the roadway still standing strong? And if not, is it within your remit to reach out, or is there some kind of partnership between EMA, SWIMCOL, and UTT as it relates to that? I don't know.
Sure, you're correct, and we're eagerly awaiting the results, and I stress results because of the science behind it. And once they're able, so the testing had to literally, and I stand to be corrected, 1 year of actually in-field testing on an actual road. And so that was the prerequisite and the criteria. So we've come to the end. I think we might be very well probably just past month number 12 or month number 11. I stand to be corrected, as this is a UTT project, and we have been following up to ensure, because this is an opportunity for us to say they've done it, we could bring it to other ministries and other technologies and other private pavers and say this is an opportunity how we could start reducing what we do here. Secondly, when the policies come in and we start opening up markets and networking to find out where could this crumb be used, because this world is now literally, it's all interconnected with technology, and find other markets. Now we need to produce it. So I think we need to be able to make sure that we have the opportunities. We have to find the markets that we can network with. And ironically, this is not an issue that is only isolated, unfortunately, to Trinidad and Tobago. The rest of the Caribbean is very much asking questions on what are we going to do. So this might be an opportunity, because once it's finished, we can say there's an opportunity, but we need to also find other areas where we could include entrepreneurs who can invest in these machines to strip, because you remove the fabric, remove the wire, which could be then sold in, with respect to cycling, and then the diagram has to be adjusted. I also want to probably throw this all to the committee and to be sensitive towards the investment that UTT made, or you could just buy a machine on Alibaba or any one of those networks. The technology to tweak it to get to actually where they are literally was a humongous task. That their engineers, it was not just a plug-in, although the brand said, yes, that's plug and play. They literally had to reconfigure the machine based on what they wanted, and that took a lot of technical input and engineering. And as a result, that also limits how many people will get into it. So we'll buy the machine, it says you can do 800 tires an hour, and then you realize you're stuck with a lemon because you need to tweak it. And I want us to be very, very mindful. While we want to find solutions, we want to find solutions that are sustainable, not solutions that are going to take one bandit off and end up with another problem, because we don't want to recreate those issues going down. I want us to learn from people who've done it better. We are not in that business just yet. And I think by us networking and sharing best practice, I am confident when we put the policies in, the tires is something that is right at the top of that list apart from plastics. So we remit our commitment to solving this problem. It's something that we all are very concerned about. It's a fire hazard, it's an environmental problem. And I'll also share something with you all. If we were to put that into a landfill as a tire, tires float back up to the surface. It's a phenomenon that I only learned when I got into solid waste. But so you can't use it like that. So there are other options we can use for backfilling. But once again, we need to ensure that through the EMA and through other organizations, we don't take a solution and make it into another problem that becomes leaching, or there are issues with the metal in it. And so we want to be very, very careful that while we think we have a fantastic quick fix, it becomes another environmental problem that we committed and we actually contributed towards. So I think that's just my position. I also say that we want to be very careful how we move ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask my question to the THE to see if there are any opportunities in terms of innovation around treatment the same issue that you all may be exploring in Tobago and what is being done.
Madam Chair, through you, I'm happy that we are given the opportunity to add the Tobago perspective on the issue. And I'll ask the Public Health Inspector for Mr. Ricardo Bob to address the matter.
Madam Chair, the Tobago situation will be similar in terms of how we deal with tires, because most of our tires are brought to the Stanley Park landfill, and these are discussions that we are having as well.
So there's no processing or anything, it's just taken to the landfill at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, so another question I have, right? Given that fact, and I live country, I live close to Stanley Park, what is being done to test the impact of that on the nearby communities?
Could you be a little bit more specific in terms of?
Just off of the Stanley Park landfill, we have Granby Bay, we have the fort there, we have Mount St. George community nearby. Are you assessing to see how the landfill is impacting the quality of life of persons residing in those communities, as well as for the marine life and all of that down at the Granby Bay? Sorry.
Because of the location of the landfill and where Granby Bay is located, in terms of any runoff and so on from the landfill, it doesn't usually go in that direction. Yeah. Also, where the tires are stored, it's at the highest point because it's very strategic in terms of what we tend to have to deal with. So in terms of where the garbage is and where the tires are, we choose the highest point to put the tires, being aware of some of the limitations we have in terms of dealing with this type of waste.
Yeah. I was looking at the information that was submitted in terms of the recycled material and the tonnage over a period of time, right? And then in 2020, we had 7.37 tons recycled. 2021, 108.84 tons, and 2022, 102.63 tons, and then in 2023 went down to 83.81 tons. What would have accounted for that decline?
Thank you very much, Member. Through you, Madam Chair. 2020 was actually year zero for us and so on, right? And the activities actually started in October of 2020. So the 7 tons that you are seeing represented there, right? That only accounts for October to December. We also have to sort of remember that at that point we were sort of dealing with the COVID epidemic and so on. So it was relatively new. Yes, I'm just trying to be a little more comprehensive in the response, but I'll certainly get to that. So you will see that the following year and so on that there was a significant increase. Of course, we had significantly more activities on the ground in terms of collection and processing and so on. But in addition to that, we had some existing stockpiles up at the Stock Park landfills, stockpiles of plastic bottles and so on, right? Those actually went into processing in the subsequent years. All right. I would also take note that you would have mentioned 2023, and there was a decrease. All right. I think that the decrease would have been accounted for by a sort of downturn in terms of the level of activity, which was essentially influenced by a downturn in the funding and so on available to sort of support the activities. It was purely a matter of funding, yes.
Marcus?
Yeah, thanks. To you, Chief Admin. So the gentleman to your left would have, both of them would have expounded on things and activities that are happening. You heard about the locations for these things. Are these things also happening within the Tobago space? Or is Tobago operating independently when it comes to this type of activity?
Madam Chair, the gentleman to the left is Mr. Linford Beckles, who is the...
To
okay.
your left.
Okay.
Mr. Romano and Mr. D'Souza, yes, those.
Good.
You know, they expounded on all the things that they are doing, the collection of things, the ICANN projects, etc. Are these things repeated and happening in Tobago as well?
Yes, they would have mentioned that they are also happening in Tobago, but the extent to which they are happening in Tobago, I'll ask Mr. Linford Beckles, who is the Senior Director in the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Energy to respond.
Thank you again, Chief Ed. So let me take the opportunity to start with the recycling activities since you were there. The Tobago's Assembly in 2020 in early 2020, that is, took a decision to engage in significant recycling activities pursuant to some of the policy prescriptions in the National Recycling Policy and so on. Right? We too in Tobago are subject to those national policies, and we started in a partnership that was defined by initially 3 partners: the Division of Infrastructure and the Environment at that time, the division responsible for public health, which is now the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, and there was a private sector partner named RWL Limited Recycling, Waste and Logistics. Right, so those were the 3 partners that started the initiative. On the basis of the good relationship that we have with the EMA, and I suspect the EMA in recognizing its responsibility nationally, engaged with us a few months after. They were a very integral partner in providing funding and other kinds of support to the project in Tobago. And of course, the Green Fund. The Green Fund would have partnered with us in executing the project. I would say that over the time, the project was very successful. All right. I'd probably even argue that of the 6 regions in Trinidad and Tobago where similar projects were actually executed, the most successful region was in Tobago. I don't know if Hayden is going to invite me back to the EMA after I say this, but yeah, I don't. So yeah, so we enjoyed successes and so on. But having said that, I mean, it wasn't really without its challenges and so on. All right. The major funders were really the Tobago House of Assembly and the Environmental Management Authority, almost half and half in terms of the financial support. But of course, I would say as a responsible public agency, the EMA in December of 2022 would have alerted us to the fact that they were a bit out of pocket. I suspect as a result of monies not, forthcoming from the Green Fund to support the recycling activities, and that as of April of 2023, they will no longer be in a position to support us in the way that they had been supporting us. So they gave us, I would say, a reasonable lead time in terms of reasonable notice, and so on. Of course, we would have explored opportunities within the Tobago House of Assembly to finance the project beyond that, and so on. And to some extent, that is being done. But of course, as all of us would really appreciate, the financial situation in the country at large and in the Tobago House of Assembly in particular is quite challenging. But certainly, we retain our steadfast commitment to addressing the situation with respect to recyclables on the island, and we are going to certainly continue in that vein.
Just to follow up, and again, understanding the uniqueness is the way they like to describe it of Tobago. I'll just go back to where we started, relative to health and the bio-waste coming out from health, and the fact that they have this advanced technology in San Fernando and so on. Is it that most of it, in terms of bio-waste and so on, from the hospitals and so on, is being dealt with by incinerator in Tobago as we speak now?
Thank you very much for that question. The administrator, who is the accounting officer, the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, she will give the response.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, at this time, the bio-waste from the Tobago Regional Health Authority is being dealt with through incineration.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to set and level it. Is it, again, Chair, maybe I could circle back to you now. Is it the intention, given the great success that is happening in South, with the specific technology that you're using there in the cleansing and disposal, is it, now that that is proved and so on, the intent to have this expand throughout all of the other regional health authorities and make its way even to Tobago?
To answer the question, apologies. So just to recall that the activity that took place at the San Fernando General Hospital was a pilot project. So very much focused at that, the Southwest Regional Health Authority. I think at this stage it would be incumbent on the different regional health authorities to take it upon themselves to decide whether that's a technology they'd like to adopt in their respective health authorities. Based on actually discussion that we've had with the SWRHA, we have heard that there have been some level of engagement taking place. So it's good to know there is some discussion taking place. But in terms of whether definitive positions have been taken, of course, I can't say at this point in time.
The pilot project has ended as a pilot and is now a full production system. And therefore, so the assumption that I'm making, which I'd like you to go, is that the pilot project was successful.
Yeah. Yes, so I would say that, yes, the objectives of the pilot have been achieved. The autoclave was installed. It is
Yeah.
commissioned. It is, as far as we were aware, has been active. So yes, I would say so.
No, wait, no. Sorry, this is the engineering side of me coming out. The pilot would have been set up to achieve certain things, not just to build it, turn it on, put it in, get it working. It had to be able to manage certain things, the outcomes and the outputs and the benefits from it would have to be things that would tick off to indicate that the pilot itself was successful. The fact that it's still in use, I would assume that that is so. What I'm saying is, the reason why I'm asking that is that the success of the pilot and its continuance into production would have led to, as a project, documentation and artifacts that would have identified the value, benefit, costs, etc., of this item. And therefore, it's something that would have and could have been shared through the Ministry of Health with all of the other regional health authorities in this case, in case you're looking to do the same thing. And so they don't have to go and reinvent, build a new RFP, try. You know.
But remember, shouldn't you now be going to the Ministry of Health?
Well, I was just wanted to get the confirmation that the pilot was successful and then swing back. Thank you very much for the redirection, Chair. So I'm swinging back to the Ministry of Health. Given that question, how are we going with that?
Ministry of Health.
Right, yes, so I am representative for Ministry of Health. In terms of just to clarify the question, in terms of our going forward with implementing...
No, it is the fact that for all intents and purposes, there has been a successful pilot of alternate technology in the disposal of it that is environmentally sustainable. The idea is that if that has been successful as a pilot and is now in production, then the artifacts associated with that is something that should be able to be shared, whether through the Ministry of Health, with the other regional health authorities, even evaluated by the Ministry of Health. So a recommendation can be made should there be reason to have those things installed in places like in Tobago Regional Health Authority, in the Northwest Regional Health Authority, in the South Central Regional, whether or not those things would then fall into that kind of category. So the question is, one, has that happened? And if it hasn't, two, I guess the idea would be to make it happen.
No, I'm not aware of any discussion so far, but yes, it will be taken into account and advised that we look into it, and we would have to request funding as well for something like that.
I think you're taking away some of the work of the committee.
Apologies. One more, please.
And then we take member.
Just to end. Again, just speaking to the uniqueness of Tobago, you have washing up on the shores every day, every week, every evening. Tons of, what kind of weed this is? I want to be clear. Thank you. Yes, I am all your look. Right. What, and I mean, I would consider that to be an environmental challenge. It's not man, we didn't create it, but it's something that is happening there. Given the amounts and the fact that it seems to be extremely prevalent in Tobago, what is happening where that is concerned? Is the EMA involved? Is SWMCOL involved? Is the THA? How is this being, if at all, being explored in terms of being addressed?
All right, thank you very much. Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, it's an environmental hazard. I live close to the sea coast, and when you're passing, you could smell the stench of what is taking place there. But let me ask the Senior Director, Environment, to address the matter.
Yes, thank you very much again. Well, the issue of Sargassum, I mean, that is really a big one. In the Tobago context, we have already been dealing with influxes of Sargassum since 2011. Of course, in 2011 and so on, it wasn't that significant. All right. We got the very first significant influx in 2015. Everybody would recall what Speyside looked like, and so on. Right? People went to bed in Speyside with the sea looking very, very blue and pristine, and so on. And they wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, and so on. No boat can leave the harbor, anything like that, and so on. Right? And of course, it was something quite new for all of us. Right? Very, very new for all of us. And of course, I was sort of thrown in the deep end. I was given the responsibility to deal with all of this and so on, right? And you essentially had to sort of learn on the go, learn on the job, so to speak. right? But we were able to effect the cleanup in, I think we had initially estimated 35 days, and we were able to do it in 19 days, and so on. And subsequent to that, we developed what was actually the very first Sargassum management plan in the entire Caribbean region, right? And we were able to share it with some of the other jurisdictions. I know for sure Belize, Barbados, and some of the other persons and so on we actually shared it with, right? I don't want to sound as if this was all a Tobago thing. It was substantially a Tobago thing and so on, right? But we had contributions from the Environmental Management Authority in developing that plan. We had contributions from the Institute of Marine Affairs, from the Coast Guard, and so on, right? So while it was a Tobago-led initiative and so on, there was significant national involvement in the development of the plan. I know that there was really supposed to be a national plan developed and so on. That has not happened as yet, but there is a new national Sargassum task force and so on, which is chaired by someone from the IMA. I think Dr. Rahana Juman, and I'm a part of that as well. So we are now looking at developing a framework that is a little more national in scope and so on. All right. With respect to the material on the ground and so on, I mean, the Tobago Assembly has spent significant sums in effecting cleanup over the years and so on, right? And that has really been the major activity. We have used it. People have used it for composting and so on, right? And I guess that the local conventional wisdom is say, okay, fine, this is something good for agriculture, and some people have been using it for a very long time. But one of the things that we have to be very concerned about is the level of heavy metals in the Sargassum, right? We have to be extremely, extremely concerned about that. And to that end, we did develop a proposal and so on for the approval of the Assembly to have, periodic testing of the Sargassum that we actually receive to ensure that the heavy metals don't get into the food chain. Once it gets in there, then that is it essentially, right? So we have to be very, very careful. And it is not only an issue for us in Trinidad and Tobago. It's an issue across the wider Latin America and Caribbean region. So people are actually expressing caution in terms of how we actually deal with this thing and so on, right? There have been very many other uses and so on with this for the Sargassum, but I think that on the whole, right? I think on the whole, these uses actually have what I would consider to be demonstration value. The challenge is really in upscaling this thing and so on, right? To be able to deal with the issue at a more comprehensive level. That has been the challenge not only for us, it's the challenge for Barbados, St. Vincent, Jamaica, the United States of America, everyone. It's a significant challenge. Having said that, we did with the involvement of some of our partners and so on. We recently had a sort of competition essentially. It was really under the auspices of the United Nations Development Program, where we were actually, trying to encourage entrepreneurs to, look for opportunities in terms of, using the Sargassum to do different businesses and so on, right? So we had quite a few participants from Tobago. We did have some participants from Trinidad because the plane and the boat walk in, right? And we don't discriminate. Okay, so we had some participants from across the nation, and I think that we were amazed to see some of the very bright ideas coming out and so on. We have people from Tobago who are using this Sargassum to make cosmetics and so on, right? I believe that the chief administrator is a patron of one of those business persons, right? She patronizes the business, and so on. And people are doing wonderful things with it and so on. Of course, it is something that is also very expensive because they have to do the requisite testing. And I think much of the testing for the heavy metals is done actually out of the country because we don't have the in-country capacity to do the heavy metal testing, right? I think much of it is done at the University of the West Indies lab in Kingston, Jamaica, right? And it's extremely expensive. So I am suggesting here that that there's a role that the government can actually play, that the state agencies can actually play in providing support to some of these entrepreneurs to defray some of the expenses and so on related to the kind of significant testing and kind of involved testing that they have to do in an effort to ensure that the products are safe for public use.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I don't want Mr. Mitchell, who is the delegation of one from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, to feel that he's being left out because he's a delegation of one. And I think we could ask him and let him share some of the good stories coming out of his ministry. So, Mr. Mitchell, maybe I'll start off and the other members will come in. I've seen that you all have indicated that CPEP was considering looking at acquiring a composting facility. They've looked at a parcel of land through the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. What is the status of this?
Well, the status of that particular project, it's still in what I would call the planning stages and the discussion phase. But that is not the only project that we have.
All right, so just before you go on, it's still in the planning and discussion, so you've done your feasibility.
Right. Yeah, I have to check with CPEP to see where the feasibility has reached, but what I have been advised is that it's still in the planning and discussion phase with Ministry of Agriculture with respect to the acquiring of the land. With respect to the purchase of the equipment, that is subject to the availability of funding. I know they have submitted proposals for this fiscal. Of course, when the budget is read, we get funding for CPEP below than what we asked for. So that is the only risk factor I see with that, because one of the things with CPEP that we have to do is, in all of this discussion, is to see how they can do revenue generating for itself as well, so that they can advance, because it is part of their strategic plan. So we are in discussion regularly with CPEP on that issue.
So the acquiring of the equipment and machinery, that was not under PSIP?
No, they were, as you know, we provide a subvention to CPEP.
Yeah.
So it's under the recurrent side.
Right,
it's not
yes.
on the PSIP side. So they submitted proposals for that under the recurrent side for transfers to state enterprises. But unfortunately, what we asked for, we got less, so we had to prioritize to do the core work of CPEP at this point in time.
So can I therefore think that certainly there's no hope of that project or concept going forward in fiscal 2025?
At this point, no. I don't see it, no, until if circumstances change or whatever.
Okay, but in terms of, so that can happen through CPEP, but there was also a project that Port of Spain City Corporation was looking at. And they were supposed to do a pilot at somewhere in Woodbrook, I believe. What is the status of that? Because I'm just thinking that if you can't do it under CPEP, if another corporation could do it, and then there are synergies and so on.
Yeah, we have told our municipal corporations to be very innovative, and Port of Spain, San Fernando, and one or two of the regional corporations have been pushing that to come up with ideas in terms of how to deal with the waste value initiative that we sort of mandated them to look at in terms of creating independent revenue streams. So Port of Spain is ahead on that, and it is it's going on a small scale right now, but with respect to Port of Spain, we do have some challenges there in terms of the assets, in terms of making sure that their assets are up to par to deal with that. So it is ongoing, and I must say, with respect to the capital city, the council had been very innovative in terms of how they want to contribute in terms of dealing with the waste management issues, and we are trying to support them in that area.
And maybe Mr. D'Souza could assist with this. In terms of the regional corporations, there was a project, and you have to help me because my memory escapes me, Point Fortin, and I believe San Fernando, were the two that carried on with the project. You approached 8, 5 took up on it. Anybody recalls what that project is? But Point Forte has found a way to deal with that.
Sure, that was the municipal chair.
Yes.
Municipal curbside collection.
Right. Again, that's waste.
It is.
Yeah.
And what would have happened is that we've approached 14 of the corporations. Out of that, 8 participated out of the 14. And at this point in time, after the 6-month trial, 2, very much as you're very correct just now, were able to maintain and support the same program.
Right.
The challenges that was encountered in there had to do primarily with financing and the ability to logistically get the collection and the disposal of the material, and that became, in a way, the deal breaker. But they were able to send because they were able to find where the funding was going to come from. And we could share that information right now, and I could probably even, with Mr. Romano on my right side here, DESI logistics is 90% of your cost, apart from the processing, just to go along and collect. So there is a cost factor that does hinder the ability to be able to collect this and manage it inside there. So sometimes what we've seen based on the feedback as to why it was not sustainable, cost was a significant factor inside there.
But let me ask something, and Mr. Mitchell, has any analysis been done to see how Point Forte, because all you municipal corporations would say they didn't get their dream, right? How Point Forte has been able, and San Fernando, been able to sustain that project, regardless of the fact that they don't have utopia, and see whether, because it means that the waste, because that is recyclables, nah? That is a recyclable project. It means that the waste still exists. The recyclables still exist. It's a problem that will fall to somewhere else. Has any analysis been done to see how Point Forte has been able to manage, how San Fernando has been able to manage, or if there are synergies? Because, I mean, Trinidad and Tobago is small. The difference between Point Forte and another municipal corporation in that big in a geographic area. If there are ways that, the corporations can work together to partake in a municipal project for recycling.
Yes, interestingly, we had a meeting at the Ministry of Planning last year with the CDB where the experiences of Point Forte and San Fernando was expounded and their experiences, and we were looking to replicate. But I think specifically with Point Forte, Point Forte is very unique in municipal corporations because they actually own a landfill.
Okay.
And that landfill has not reached its peak as yet. And they do their curbside project as well, as the CEO said, but they also do sorting at their landfill as well. So I think that landfill also serves the Superior Regional Corporation as well. Okay? So I think with Point Forte is because of that unique. San Fernando has a very smaller landfill, but not at the size of Point Forte. So I think that it probably is where, when we had that discussion at the Ministry of Planning last year, I think that is where you had that success, because they had this asset, which is the Guapo landfill. I think the sustainability of that project kept going because there is this synergy between the landfill management as well as the garbage collection and the curbside project that is going on. So one of the things that, as I said with the ministry, we are looking at is to look at the successes in one corporation and try to replicate it in other corporations. But I think because Point Forte has that asset that is unique to the Southwest Peninsula, I think that is one of the key reasons for their success in that area.
Yeah, but maybe I'm missing something, because if you could explain to me, how does the fact that they have a landfill assist the municipal recycling project? And I don't know if Mr. D'Souza could assist.
So I'm not very familiar with what might be happening, because we're primarily responsible for the Beetham, Guanapo, and the Forest Park, where we do our sorting, recycling, and also in tandem with IKEA.
Yeah.
So I don't want to misrepresent. I don't know if anybody on my committee who might be in this case, I don't know if Ms. Whitehall might be familiar or anybody on my team might be a little more current with what might be happening at the other municipalities who may speak to that. So I would not be able to say that. I'd probably invite anyone else who may.
Might I ask this? Under your particular project, all you really do is sort?
No, we are responsible for disposing, and we also have transfer stations where we actually sort in, working with the iCare program.
Right.
So as they collect, they'll bring it to NAMDEFCO. We do the sorting there, and that's what we're working. So we're doing it at Guanapo, Forest Park, and then we also at Port of Spain and NAMDEFCO. That's where we're going to be sorting, Madam Chair.
Right, but under that municipal corporations project, and the recyclables coming to you at Sumcol?
I do believe a small percentage of it would be coming in where it's actually going to be delivered and collected. And there are other private people who are also working outside it, and that's a percentage we may not know what the quantity is, but there's some other players inside there also, Madam Chair.
But under your project, all right, it comes to you.
Madam Chair, you want to be more specific when you say under which project?
All right, I'm talking here, Sumcol's response, and this is with respect to your metric tons of waste that you collect. This is page 37. And you have a table 18. And Mr. Mitchell, if maybe he could share it with you if you don't have it. So you're telling me, if I understand this well, under SFCC, which is San Fernando, you give me the number of bags collected, and these bags going to Swimcall. Under point 40, you give me, so in 2024, 4,605 bags collected, and these going to Swimcall.
That would have been, yes, that would have been coming across inside there. So we do have some partnerships that we will be collecting on that side. But let me, Madam Chairman, also ask Ms. Abigail Whitehall if she might be able to speak to this in some more detail.
All right, just so just before we do that, and bear with me, Mr. Mitchell, right? These bags of waste, recyclables, under this MCRP project, let's look at point 410. I'm trying to find out what or how should be the better thing. How does the fact that point 410 has a waste facility assist it in getting 4,605 bags for Swimcall?
Okay, right. So I will endeavor to get more details on that. But what I can say is that with respect to their contribution to that project, is that it is collected and then it is sought and utilized and transported at their own landfill site. So I need to find out how much of that goes to the Swimcall project, because they do their own recycling and they do it in conjunction with the EMA, and collection is done once per week. Right?
Yeah. But this report is what Swimcall is getting.
Yeah.
This is what I understand. Mm-hmm. This is Swimcall's submission. And I could only see Swimcall collecting data on what they get, not what Point 4 Tech collects in general. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm trying to understand is, and I'm not saying no, I'm just trying to understand the relevance then of having your own, for want of a better word, landfill. Mm-hmm. How does that make you in a better position to sustain the recycling efforts of Swimcall? I think that's what I really ask.
Okay, well, I will endeavor to find out specifically for Swimcall, because I know of the project and what point important information to us is, and with the other municipal corporation, the common denominator that why Point Fortin is still sustainable at that level was because it is one of the only municipal corporation that has its own landfill, because they do sorting not only at their site, but they also do sorting at other minor sites and so forth. And I know of the project that they're doing in collaboration with the EMA. So I'll endeavor to find out about what the project with Swimcall is.
And maybe Mr. Mitchell could find out from me, because I think you also told me that San Fernando has some small...
Yeah, a bulk waste, a very small one.
What would have accounted in 2022, if you're saying that, okay, if you have your own landfill, it helps you, and maybe I might accept that because I see both San Fernando and Point Forte are the two that have remained. What would have accounted for in San Fernando for 2022? It been 1,122 bags, dropping in 2023 to 575, and further dropping in 2024 to 420.
I don't have that specific data here with me, but I endeavor to find out and I will submit it to the committee.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I could also just turn a bit to the Ministry of Public Utilities. And P.S., you know, I saw some great news about your strengthening the regulatory framework and these 3 new policies and so on, which is your National Integration Solid Waste Resource Management Policy 2024, and the National Recycling Policy 2024, and the Beverage Containers Deposit Return Policy 2024. But I was a bit confused when I heard that it is you all are currently in the process of developing an implementation plan to guide the implementation of the initiatives. Where are we with this?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. So, as you would have indicated, we are in the process of dealing with the legislative and regulatory part of this activity, having received approval from Cabinet for these 3 policies. At the moment, the policies, I shouldn't say at the moment, in August of last year, the policies were conveyed to the Chief Parliamentary Council to begin the process of legislative drafting. And so our expectation is that that will soon be engaged and we will have appearances before the LRC to present the case and to pursue the drafting. In terms of the implementation plan, we do recognize that while a lot of what we want to do is contingent on there being legislation, primarily, of course, the change from SWIMCOL to SWIMCORP, which will allow the entity that is before us today as SWIMCOL to be given some more legislative teeth to engage some of what we were talking about earlier, I believe when Member Hislop was engaging the CEO. And that would be a primary piece of legislation for us to be able to successfully implement the policies before us that have been approved by Cabinet. Additionally, the beverage container deposit return policy that was also approved, that would be one of the first waste streams. We were talking about waste streams earlier. That would be one of the first waste streams that will come out of this revised framework for waste management. More specifically, in terms of the implementation plan, one of the things we challenged ourselves to do was to run on 2 fronts to investigate whether there were items or activities we could engage that would not necessarily need to wait for the legislation. And then, of course, what is the trajectory once the legislation has been engaged, right? So I will ask the CEO if he can have a member of his team elaborate on where we are at this point with the implementation plan.
Through the Chair, there are a number of things that we can do while we await the policy. And at this point in time, we are actually doing the terms of reference for the National Advisory Council that is going to sit and oversee how this is going to be operating and ensuring accountabilities inside there and what that will comprise and what is required. We also have the other advisory committees being also introduced. These advisory committees will be the industry waste stream committees. So apart from policy, we're talking about how are we going to do this. One of the biggest problems we have in Trinidad and Tobago at this time with solid waste management is a slight disconnect of who does what, when, where, and how. With the beverage container as a model, and I could also, if anybody needs it, if you look at the model, there's a flow chart. It tells you who's responsible, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and who's responsible at different stages. And that is what we did not have before. So while True Member Hislop and also Mr. Barkas raised some questions, it brings structure into the discussion through policy. And there's going to be one body who's going to be responsible for coordinating same, and that's SwimCorp going to SwimCorp with the legislative approvals that we could coordinate and ensure the logistics is met, the financing is met, there's transparency, there's accountability. And when it comes to the waste streams, we're going to be looking at tires, plastics, metal, aluminum, and we'll bring the stakeholders who know best to those committees. And that is why the policy is important, and I alluded to that. I cannot begin to emphasize. It tells us the roadmap of how we're going to do this and who's going to do this. And for once and for all, Trinidad is going to have a policy that tells you where, what, when, and who, and there's oversight. There's no commingling of funds. There's going to be very well accounted, and it's not just going to be orchestrated by SwimCorp, but there are going to be other significant national committees who will have oversight in what is being done, because this is a national problem, Madam Chair. This is not a citizen thing that we're talking about. This is not an isolated matter. When people ask me how many employees that SwimCorp has, I say 1.4. And I've always repeated this. The minute you start touching a garbage bag on a morning, you start our process. And everybody has to be involved for this thing to be a success. We have been disconnected. We've lacked that policy. We have the will, and therefore it's going to happen. A critical part right now is that we also have, while we wait policy, there are things we could do. Right now we have a consultant through Unite Caribbean who's working on the financial and the actual material flows of what this model is going to look like with our current model for Trinidad and Tobago. And that should be completed within Q2 of this fiscal year. So therefore, we're going to have a pathway, an evaluation, a consultant, because what we realize is people have done this before us, Madam Chair, and they've done it well. There's no point in recreating the wheel or trying to do something that is best practice, and that has failed us before. We've had policies, but because they were basically disconnects or things that we did not think through at the point in time, that's why we have the 3 policies that were launched in 2024. And I cannot begin to stress to this committee, to the general public of Trinidad and Tobago, why this policy is going to be the road to success, where we need to be. And I also applaud, everyone in this room, behind me, at the side of me, and even on the committee, would have had some role to play in this formulation. And it is going to succeed, because I've realized also, when you get people in the room of like mind, with the will to do it, you can't stop it, Madam Chair. And we need to get there. And we have a good bunch of people here. We have an excellent team at SwimCorp. We have liaised with international consultants and best practice, United Nations, the Basel Convention. Everyone has made this, as I use the word, heavy lifting becomes easy, and I believe that very, very strongly. And we are on our way on doing that, sorry. Yeah, so that's the next thing also. We've also while we're going along here, we're also having consultancies with the different stakeholders. The beverage contractors, the beverage manufacturers on board, the TTMA is on board, the Supermarket Association, because we need everybody's voice and comments to be considered and fabricated or woven into a successful fabric.
Doing your consultations.
Yes, ma'am.
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing. So if I hear, one of your setbacks will be legislation. Yes? Let me ask, within the ministry, have you all prepared a bill, or it's entirely up to CPC? Because sometimes the instruction goes to CPC with a proposed draft bill. Have you all done that?
Well, we have prepared drafted instructions, right? But in prior incarnations, we have worked collaboratively with the CPC's office, preparing draft bills, amending, and so on. So it's a collaborative process that we have engaged with CPC before, and we see that now would be no different.
And what about funding?
So one of the things about this legislative process Now, while we would like it to be very short, we are very cognizant that there are many things that are high priority on this legislative agenda, and we know that the beverage container, the swim corp is also a high priority. We have purposed, having seen our allocations, and much like everyone else, not getting what we had anticipated, but we have a strategy in place for that as well, Madam Chair. You know, we have certain facilities called transfers and environments and so on. So we are committed to doing what we need to do to ensure that our priorities are met, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so Member Bacchus caught my head first, but Member Hislop caught my ear first, so I don't know how to resolve that. Yeah? Thank you for being so gracious.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one speaks to an area that I don't think we've touched yet, and it has to do with investigations for violations, people who are not behaving in a manner that is in accordance with the things that we would like. Restaurants dumping oil into the drains. You see the guys go to clean them and they ended up with this big cake of things. There's no floor to garages, and I know there was a thing done by David Oils coming out from garages. The man just empty the oil in the drain and it continues and so on. The investigative, arm of environmental management. How is that going?
So we at the EME have an environmental response and investigations unit now expanded into an environmental monitoring and compliance unit. And we're blessed to have the manager of that unit here with us today. So I would give her the opportunity to tell you all about how we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Romano, and thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bacchus. Most times, in terms of investigations, we would receive complaints. Those complaints typically come through our hotline. We do have a hotline that they receive complaints either via phone or the WhatsApp number, sometimes via email. Once a complaint comes in and we recognize that it's within our jurisdiction, we assign it a ticket. And we would usually, once the ticket is created, it's assigned to an investigating officer who will then, of course, now go out, investigating the matter, engaging the person who made the complaint to get details, engaging the person complained against, looking at the activities that are being conducted, identifying concerns, determining whether they have any of the relevant permits. We also look at other agencies that have jurisdiction because, of course, there may be other places, other entities that have a role to play. And we usually would send referrals to them as well so that they can conduct their investigations. We do joint investigations, we do joint site visits, all with the effort of trying to address those matters. So in terms of waste, for, of course, garages, the way that they dispose of their waste, whether it's done in an environmentally sound manner, if they need to maybe be referred to obtain a waste generation permit, it may be referred to the relevant department to do so. If there's a major concern and we identify that enforcement action is needed, we will refer it to our legal department for pursuing enforcement action. But we tend to try the voluntary compliance approach first so that we give people the opportunity to comply, to put things in place, to put the measures that they need to put in place. And in terms of one of the things that we usually use to regulate these types of entities as well is the Certificate of Environmental Clearance Rules. So we may also realize that they need to obtain this permit, and we will refer them to the relevant entities to submit their application as required. So in terms of emergency response and investigations, investigation of complaints is one of the ways in which we would deal with those types of activities.
Just to give, I was looking through, I didn't see anything in terms of numbers. Number of complaints, number of investigations, resolutions, by type. What is the mode? What is the typical one you get? That it may be I just didn't.
Giselle, do you have that information?
We'll gladly accept it in writing.
Yeah, we have that information.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
So we could provide that with you.
Yeah.
But, let me say one thing. The EM Act is now 30 years old. When the Act was done, it was in the hope, or maybe, they were being cautious, and they expected people to do the right thing. That has failed. And therefore, we need to relook the enforcement part of the EM Act, and we are doing that at present. We are looking at an amendment to the EM Act. Hopefully most of the work will be done this year. One of the challenges with the EM Act is majority legislation. It does require a majority. We were blessed on the both occasions that the Act went to Parliament. Every side supported it because, I think as a people we understand the importance of the environment, and we expect the same thing will happen again. But we need to relook the enforcement section of the EM Act.
Member Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. If I could engage the CEO of SWIMCOL again. In your document, I'm looking at a figure 6, waste composition for Trinidad 2023. Yeah, SWIMCOL's document, SWIMCOL's book. Booklet, sorry. I am on page 20. But that's 20 of, what section am I? Of Appendix 3.
Oh, you're in SWIMCOL.
Yeah, SWIMCOL. And help me, if you could help me and help the national public. I'm seeing that your categories of waste, you have the categories and the amount by tonnage. Well, the leading one is bio waste. 237,782,000 tons. But what is significant for me is that, and tell me if I'm reading the chart wrong. When I go to the lower half of the chart, I'm seeing recyclable waste versus non-recyclable waste. And in your landfill, 76.63% of your landfill is recyclable waste?
That is correct. And that is even more significant why the policies for us to address this needs to be brought into the public domain and made law. Literally, we are putting into our landfill, if you all want to imagine, on average, 801,202 metric tons of all material going into our 3 landfills. Beetham is 92 hectares, Guanapo is 12, and Forest Park is 22. And we're just building a mound, and we can't continue. The way we do our disposal of solid waste in a controlled environment where we compact and basically cover to ensure that there's no risk of airborne pollutants, etc., is not the way of the future. And that's why we want to go with the engineered landfill. But that statistic is correct, and that is even more reason why. And if your question of a bit of a concern, that's saying, I don't believe that 77% of that material could be redirected, that is where we need to go, and that is why we have this legislation. As I said before, I could not begin to even tell you how critical it is that we get these policies passed, adopted, and indoctrined into the culture of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, that was my concern. CEO, because if we're saying that 76, let's just say 80%, let's say 80% of our waste can be redirected. It means that there's then component 4 in the same document that speaks to the closure and rehabilitation of Bitam, Guanapo, and Forest Park landfills can actually be done.
Mm-hmm.
Because the question I was going to ask is whether or not, especially Bitam has outlived, if it has outlived the space and capacity and because I remember I'm looking for it, but I didn't see it yet in terms of what is the environmental impact that Bitam has on the wetlands. Could you share with us what is if there's any study that has been done whether or not Bitam affects a Ramsar site that is the currently bird sanctuary?
The answer is yes, and there's leachate, and we have done studies, and we have a plan on what is actually supposed to be done to rectify and to correct. So to start with, there has been a study that has been done that indicates that there is leachate that comes out and needs to be addressed. We are currently right now working with the Basel Convention and the CDC in attempting to find a way to literally stop these ponds. We have something that will have been under basically a natural biodegradable system when it comes to our fecal ponds.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we have indiscriminate dumping, where this would have been fecal ponds, but they would have picked up petrochemicals and bring it to us and say, listen, and they will deposit and basically destroyed our natural degradation ponds.
Wow.
Those ponds are now becoming a problem, and we need to basically stop what we are doing and rehabilitate these ponds and not continue. So we are in the process right now of literally finding a consultant on being able to explore. We've liaised with WASA, where we're going to ensure that all the fecal haulers, they can be redirected, because that is not our business, that's not our strength.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And as a result, they have agreed to be able to, and now we have all the other waste treatment plants, where we have agreed and we've handed over a list, but we have another number of people that is probably 50% right now. These haulers have been transferred to the WASA waste treatment to handle the fecal matter. We do have still, at this point in time, we are transitioning. We are right now in the process. We have all the stakeholders through, facilitated by PS Duke, where we're going to be able to bring all the other stakeholders together, because we need to identify literally a cutoff time of when we're going to stop taking any material, because it's not good for the environment under the current circumstances. And it should be treated and handed over to WASA to properly dispose and treat with. That is not our forte at this point in time, sir.
So have you seen any reduction at all? I guess there will be, but not anything significant. Have you seen any reduction in terms of, let's say, your over a 2-year or 3-year period, your ferrous metals and plastics and cardboard and that kind of stuff that you have been exporting? What sort of effect has that had on your intake in the landfill?
We have been processing, as we have statistically, about 405 tons of all those materials. And unfortunately, by me even stating that, I feel slightly disenchanted.
Yeah.
Because it is literally a minuscule drop in the bucket. And therefore, we need to formalize how we do this and ensure that we could capitalize on that 77%. Now, we want to be very careful here, true to the committee. This is not going to be a sudden swoop.
No, yeah,
we need to start, and we need to start now and formulate this. And once again, I don't want to sound like a proverbial broken record, Madam Chair. The policies are the pivoting point for how we address everything that we see on this document, and to ensure that we could now start towards sustainable economies, driving entrepreneurship, and ensuring that the circular economies and the hierarchical structure of waste could be adopted by Trinidad and Tobago.
Madam Chair, could I go back to TH at a later time? Or?
Okay.
Okay. So I just want to quickly touch on a couple items concerning the Tobago House of Assembly. I heard the administrator for the Division of Health speak to the incinerators. In your submission, there's a phrase, external service providers. Could you share with us who are the external service providers and what services do they do they provide as it relates to incinerating of the biohazard waste?
Yes.
And the cost, if possible?
Thanks for your question. At this time, I know there is one external service providers that provide incineration services. The costs I'm not able to provide at this time. Also, the name of the service provider I'm not able to provide at this time.
Madam Chair, I hope we could get that information in writing as soon as possible.
Certainly.
All right. In terms of the Studley Park landfill, you had a couple of measures, short-term, medium-term. Where are we in relation to actually achieving those short-term goals and medium-term goals? And if I could highlight a couple of them, it says improve support for scrap metal operators, expansion of a pilot project, curbside collection. So it's not necessarily to the Studley Park landfill, but overall expansion of the incarnation of the Tobago Recycling Resource Initiative, facilitating and phasing out of plastic bags in the retail sector and so on, and a couple of others. Those are your short-term measures to assist in achieving a target of 50% reduction by 2045.
Thank you very much for the question. I think the Senior Director, Beckles, is best positioned to respond to the questions. I'll ask him to respond, and if he needs support from the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, we provide that support.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief Administrator, and thank you, Senator Hislop, for the question. And Senator Hislop, yes, you are quite right in that those measures are not necessarily specific to the Studley Park landfill and so on necessarily. Obviously, we spoke a little earlier in the program about the recycling initiative and so on. Right. Essentially, that was an initiative that was really a pilot initiative, right? And on the basis of the successes that we have seen, then there's an interest. There's an interest in expanding the program and so on, so that we would be in a much better place to achieving some of the goals that we actually identified, and so on, right, over time. One of the things I think that is actually critical to expanding the program is really investing more in curbside collection. Now, Senator Hislop, you are very familiar with the Tobago landscape, and you know that curbside collection could be something that is quite challenging in areas that you and I come from. All right. It's probably a little easier in the tongue area, so to speak, right, where the communities are a little more organized, I would say. All right. So one of the things that we're going to do in the current financial year and so on is to actually test out the curbside collection and so on in areas like Castara, for example, right, where the terrain is extremely hilly, the roads are very, very narrow. Collection is a little more challenging as opposed to somewhere like Bonaccord, for example, Senator Hislop. All right, because we as we move ahead, we cannot just focus on the areas where it's easier to do things. Of course, where there are low-hanging fruits, you try to pick them, right? But eventually, you have to climb to the top of the tree, right? So that you are much more inclusive in what you do, and that you give yourself a much better chance of being successful in the final analysis. All right. So could you just repeat some of the specific areas that you're interested in? I think I addressed two of them so far.
Yeah. In your document, it speaks to facilitating the phasing out of plastic bags in the retail sector in collaboration with business chambers, upscale composting of organic. Well, I think you spoke to that with the Sargassum. Yeah. Improve collection and disposal of derelict vehicles, Right, and you spoke to the curbside collections. I just wanted to know where we were as it relates to as it relates to these.
Yeah. So with respect to the curbside collection, as I indicated, that is something that is going to be pursued in the current financial year. We did receive a specific mandate from the Chief Secretary to actually have it done, and it's something that we're actually working on. As I indicated, it is not something that is totally new to us because we have done curbside collection in Buku and so on, right? But what is going to be new for us is doing it in areas like Castara and Speyside and those places and so on, where the landscape is significantly more challenging, right?
And just to back up, I think one of the major ones that I wanted you to clarify is the improved support for scrap metal operators through the grant of lands to facilitate organized sanitary storage and easier transportation to Trinidad for processing.
Very, very good. I'm actually happy that you mentioned that. I would say that I have actually been one of the proponents of providing greater support from state agencies for the scrap metal industry, so to speak, because I think that those scrap metal operators, I think that they perform a very important service for us in the national community. In Tobago, and I suspect, I'm not so familiar with the Trinidad situation, but I suspect it might be quite similar in the Trinidad situation. We have people who are really performing an important waste management service by collecting a lot of this material and storing it and so on. However, almost invariably, the storage is not done in a way that we can describe it as being best practice. And quite often it is related to issues about land tenure and so on, right? Essentially, you can store your things on property that belongs to you, right? Obviously, given the way our communities are organized and so on, as you store things in your yard, you are also next to somebody else's property. And that in itself creates unintended consequences in terms of rodents and things of that nature and so on. So as you are trying to solve one issue, you're actually creating another, right? And again, sanitizer, you are very familiar with the socio-economic structure of Tobago, and more specifically, what we can afford and can't afford, all right? And my proposal has always been, and this is a long-standing proposal, let us in the interest of public health, let us, in the interest of environmental sustainability, provide a central area, right, where these operators can actually set up and store their equipment, store their material, and so on, in a more sanitary and in a more organized manner, and that kind of thing. And while Tobago is not geographically huge, there are still sufficient areas that are under state control, right, where these activities can actually be done very, 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 very safely. And to that end, I would say that they start listening to me and so on, right, which is very good. And to that end, we had a meeting just a few months ago with the scrap metal operators and so on. The head of the scrap metal association from Trinidad was there, and so on. And we had very healthy discussions and so on. And it is hoped and so on that in the very near future that we'll be able to make good on some of these proposals, so that we provide a more safe environment for all of us to exist in, and provide the scrap metal operators with the kind of support that I think they deserve and that they have not been getting for a very long time.
Madam Chair, I want to ask concerning this waste oil management system for Tobago, which includes an oil processing facility. But I want to ask it also in the context of what is the situation with the storage of the oil at Studley Park Landfill, the oil that was when we had the oil spill, that oil that was stored there. What is the status? Have we determined whether or not it is a safe way to store the oil? Has there been any leach? What's the status with that, and what's the plan for it?
And the senior okay. Go ahead, Senior Director.
So I think I'm going to attempt the more difficult question first, right? Which has to do with the storage of the material from the shoreline cleanup at Studley Park. Obviously, everyone would know that on the 7th of February we had this big oil spill in Tobago, and that all resources, Tobago-based resources and national resources, were brought to bear on the situation and so on in an attempt to bring relief to the people of Tobago. And I'm very happy to report that that collaborative effort bore significant fruit and so on, right, to the extent that people are now significantly more comfortable in their spaces and so on. Obviously, we had to find somewhere to store the material. And at the time, the area that was identified to store the material was at the Studley Park landfill. It's an integrated landfill. However, it was always the intention for that storage, for the storage of that material at the Studley Park landfill to be only temporary, and the intention is still for it to be temporary. The Tobago House of Assembly was always willing and ready to take up its responsibility with respect to the final disposal solutions for the oil that is stored at the Studley Park landfill. Of course, to do that, we would have required significant financial support from the national government and so on. Because the shoreline cleanup is actually not the most significant cost associated with with managing the entire situation. What is actually more expensive is actually the final disposal, right? And most of us would be familiar with the quantum of money that we have spent thus far in effecting the shoreline cleanup. Having said all of that, we meaning the Tobago House of Assembly and so on, under the aegis of the Chief Administrator, we were formally approached by the Ministry of Energy. I believe to the best of my knowledge, it might have been in June or July of 2024. We were approached by the Ministry of Energy for them to assume responsibility for the final disposal of the waste that is at Studley Park. Suffice it to say, the Tobago House of Assembly acceded to that request. To the best of my knowledge, the Ministry of Energy went ahead and they appointed the National Gas Company as their agent to deal with that situation. Bids were invited, and to the best of my knowledge, those bids are being evaluated by the National Gas Company. Beyond that, I really cannot say. But what I want to put on record is that we in the Tobago space, we have an interest in dealing with that situation in Tobago once and for all in terms of the stored oil. And I also want to put on record that we are very, very thankful and very, very appreciative of the support that we have received from all the national agencies in dealing with that issue in Tobago. And in the context of monitoring, one of the things that we do on a regular basis is that we monitor the waterways, the freshwater resources in the area, and we also monitor the nearshore coastal area and so on. We do regular water quality testing there. And the testing that we have done to date, there is nothing to suggest, right, that there has been any leakage and so on from the cells that are up there and so on to compromise the water quality in the stream at Studley Park or in the nearshore coastal area at Barbados Bay. And this information is information that we have shared with our good friends at the Environmental Management Authority and so on. So as we do the work and so on, we share it. We don't really have anything to hide.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a few questions to the EMA. And Managing Director, a little while ago, I think you undertook to present a listing of breaches. I've noticed in your submission that you all indicated that over the last 5 years, there have been no charges or fines under Litter Act and under Public Health Act. And I was wondering what was the cause of that? If it is that the soft approach that Ms. Joseph spoke about, so that there were breaches, but the soft approach resolved the issue, or if it is a capacity issue.
The Litter Act and the Public Health Act is separate from the Environmental Management Act.
Mm-hmm.
Those are acts that our environmental police unit are using through their police powers.
Mm-hmm.
Because of capacity issues, we feel that those two acts are better dealt with by municipal police and these other people, where they have those resources and the public health inspectors.
Mm-hmm.
So we have moved away from that area to concentrate more on the EM Act and the areas of the EM Act.
Okay, so you don't, as authority, even collect the data concerning that?
No, we don't.
All right, thanks a lot. And something I saw very interesting where you said that your EPU regularly patrols areas that are known for illegal dumping.
We do. In the hope of catching somebody.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, what we see is the dumped material,
Yeah.
and we will report it to the various local government authorities.
Yeah.
The challenge with these incidents is that you cannot catch the people, and you need to catch somebody to charge them.
All right. So it's not a question of, again, capacity.
No, it is capacity.
Okay.
But in the Caroni Swamp, where we have our environmentally sensitive species, the scarlet ibis, we would patrol those areas. And the Caroni area is one area where there's dumping. And therefore, in patrolling in terms of the environmentally sensitive species, we come up upon somebody that is dumping, we will charge, but that has not happened.
All right. And I was a bit interested in the air pollution rules. And, I wanted to know how many registrants you have who are emitters.
Good. So we, again, blessed to have the manager permitting with us, Ms. Vijaya Ramkalawan, and she can give you all that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific number, but I can give you a ballpark. It's about 350 registrants we have to date.
All right. And is that, let's look at, say, the last 5 years. Has that been a static number, or have you been seeing increases in registrants? And what sort of processes do you all engage to encourage people to register?
It's been a static number, but I would say the unit has been engaging in sensitization sessions to specific groups. So we may, for example, from our compliance unit, we understand that there's some complaints from auto body garages, for example, and we would undertake a sensitization session for a group within that particular sector to sensitize them on the rules, what it requires, what is required of them, best practices and management. So those types of specific targeted sensitization sessions are what we have been doing recently.
Have you seen any sort of benefits coming out of that?
Yes. Interestingly enough, we get a lot of queries and questions on, oh, this is what I'm doing, am I doing it correctly? Are there any other guidance that you can provide to me? Or interestingly enough, as they become aware of the legislation, I think my neighbor is doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Can I lodge a complaint with you? So they become very much aware of what the EMA's role is in the legislation. And so through that, they have now become more self-aware or self-educated on the environment.
Okay. And Mr. Managing Director, I don't know to whom, I wanted to find out if, as far as operators under your Rule 10, the air pollution rules, Rule 10.2, how many operators were required? Because I get the impression that you all could, you don't have to wait for somebody to come. You can require people to register or for their quality to be assessed. You can require that from the EMA. So I'm trying to find out
Definitely.
in the last 5 years, and this is really your rule, I think it's 31.2.
Right.
How many instances in the last 5 years?
So we can write you and tell you that we require, based on what you're doing, we require you to put in an application.
Yeah.
Again, Vijaya permitting, I mean, we'll give you details.
Madam Chair, so what you're asking is specifically the number of notifications we've issued in the last 5 years. If I can beg, please, we will submit that information to you.
All right, good, thanks. Because you see, what my concern is, and I'd seen, I now realize when they warn us about Sahara dust and the air quality and so on, I have to be grateful. We can't only just talk about things that ain't being done, you know, on behalf of the national community, and particularly people who are challenged with all kinds of things like COPD and asthma and so on. That is really a great service. But what concerns me is that comes from your testing at specific sites. What happens, classic example, my neighbor next door running a garage. Okay, your information about what is happening in specific sites does not really translate to what is happening by me. How do you monitor that?
So your neighbor having a garage or having a sawmill or having some other
some kind of chemical process.
Exactly. Yeah. Is now becoming a larger issue because of how we have developed as a country. When your neighbor started off, I mean, he just lost his job. He had one car and you were feeling sorry for him and he thought it was all right for him to have, you know, repairing one job because he's trying to feed his family. When the business grows, it now becomes a problem to you. The town and country planning, I mean, say if the thing is happening more than 4 years, they are constrained to act. Local governments similarly are constrained because of the length of time that this thing is happening. And therefore, you know, the EMA is the one that gets involved because a garage will require a certificate of environmental clearance. And the challenge that we are discussing now with the other agencies, TCPD, Commission of State Lands, local government, is how could we be involved when the activity is not permitted for that area? Because this is a residential area. Remember, all we are dealing with is the 44 designated activities, and we are trying to get the environmental impact of these activities. The planning permission for that activity will come from elsewhere, and it's a challenge that we are all looking at, and hopefully sometime soon we will come to a solution, and maybe the solution involves what is the amendments will happen to the EM Act. But What we do is to go in, as Giselle is saying, and talk to the operator and tell them, listen, you know, you can't be doing this. You're supposed to have a certificate of environmental clearance. You're supposed to have this. You're supposed to have that. And really to see if we can appease their neighbor. In some instances, I mean, the neighbors are so incensed that they will take the route of going to court, and that is something that the courts will decide upon.
This is my concern, in that if the regulatory agencies work, then people don't have to run the expense of going to court with some kind of private nuisance action or something like that. So it's a question of seeing how do you all operate in circumstances like this and helping the little person with their issues. Okay, so thank you very much. Any more questions, committee? Okay, so I want to thank you all. It's now 5:37, I think it is. So I want to thank you all from the various agencies, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, the Ministry of Planning and Development, the SWIMCOL, the Ministry of Public Utilities, EMA, Ministry of Health, THA. I'm going off my head now, so I have to make sure I have everybody. Ministry of Health. I didn't do too badly. I just THA, got everybody. I got SWIMCOL too. And SWIMCOL, I want to thank you all for coming and engaging us in this very important discussion. I think some undertakings were given. The Secretariat will write you all, and there are some questions that we still have left for some of the various ministries and agencies for us to carry on this conversation. This hearing, public inquiry, has not as yet been completed. I think SWIMCOL in talking, there was a reference to WASA. And there is going to be a continuing of this inquiry with WASA at some future date. So some of you all may be required to come back based on what WASA's submission would be. So this is just a little in advance. Again, I want to thank you all. I want to wish you all success for 2025, because your success is our success. Okay, and to wish you all a safe journey. This part of this meeting, let me just thank the listening public, the members of the listening public who have stayed with us. Thank you very much. So I want to bring this part of the meeting, suspend this part of the meeting. Again, thank you. Safe journey home. This meeting, public hearing, is now suspended. Thank you.